Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. Case 1. Anaya Marie Day Garrett was born on September 2nd, 2013 in Euclid, Ohio, to parents Sierra Day and Michael Garrett. Her parents never married and separated before Anaya turned 2. In turn, Sierra gained full custody of Anaya, while Michael did everything he could to remain part of her life. Growing up, Anaya was described as energetic and outgoing. She loved to sing and dance, bringing laughter to everyone who watched her. Her favorite color was pink, but behind her happiness lay a fractured family dynamic that would set the stage for the challenges she'd face. As Anaya grew older, cracks began to form in her once sparkling world. By 2016, concerns relating to her physical well-being started to surface. During his visitation time with his daughter, Michael noticed injuries that Sierra often downplayed or dismissed entirely. For example, he recalled instances where Anaya had visible bruises on her chest and back. Sierra explained these injuries away as accidents or minor mishaps, but Michael grew increasingly uneasy. Before long, arguments between the two parents reached an all-time high, ultimately prompting Sierra to file a restraining order against her ex. Court order alleged that Michael was harassing Sierra and overstepping in his limited role as a parent. While Michael fought very hard to gain full custody, he was effectively barred from contacting Sierra directly or visiting Anaya without a neutral third party present, such as a social worker or a designated court monitor. Sierra started isolating herself and refused to allow her children to visit with any of their loved ones. Rather than accept help from Anaya's father or extended family, Sierra chose to enroll her daughter in daycare. Shortly after her arrival at the Harbor Crest Daycare in Euclid, workers began documenting new injuries observed in Anaya's body that seemed to appear daily. Abrasions, burns, and even black eyes were ultimately detailed in a total of 18 observation reports filed by staff, which were in turn filed to their supervisors. In one of the reports, a daycare worker noted that Sierra frequently dismissed the concerns for her child, claiming that Anaya was a liar. In May of 2017, Anaya arrived at daycare with bumps on her head and a scrape on her face. That day, she informed a caretaker, and I quote, "Mommy pushed me down the steps." Sierra assured the caretaker that her daughter had simply fallen at a park. Days later, Anaya showed up at daycare, this time complaining that she had a headache. Upon examination, blisters were found on her scalp and dried blood inside of her ear. Sierra insisted that this was just an allergic reaction to a Johnson & Johnson baby wash that she'd been using. In the same breath, she proceeded to change her story, claiming that these particular injuries may have been caused by Anaya's braid that had been wound too tight. When Anaya was pulled aside, her story was much different than her mother's, insisting that, and I quote, "Mommy hit me. Mommy hurt me." As a result, the owner of the daycare facility notified the police, and Anaya was transported to the hospital for physical evaluation. Despite the multiple reports and medical treatment, Anaya was subsequently released back to her mother. Concerns for the little girl only grew when Sierra began dating a man named Deontay Lewis in July of 2017. While Deontay had no previous criminal record, 26-year-old who worked as a local security guard was the furthest thing from a protector, was incapable of keeping anyone safe, let alone Anaya. Family members described Deontay as controlling, and when he entered the picture, the family dynamic took a turn for the worse. While the child's biological father had been made aware of the reports, he also witnessed the violence firsthand. During a visit to the home in September of 2017, Michael discovered bruises on Anaya's chest and back. On a separate occasion, Michael took notice of a rotting tooth Anaya had been suffering with that had gone untreated. Michael subsequently photographed these injuries and filed his own report with the Cleveland police. Despite Michael's multiple petitions to the courts, expressing fears for his daughter's safety, law enforcement failed to take appropriate action, allowing the violence to continue unchecked. A few months later, in December of 2017, the Cuyahoga County Department of Children and Family Services received an emergency referral regarding allegations of violence and neglect involving Anaya. When a social worker visited Sierra's apartment, she observed more bruises and burns on Anaya's body, but for some reason deemed the child's living conditions as up to par after confirming functional utilities, food supplies, and requirements of basic necessities had been met. While law enforcement assured Anaya's father they were looking into the matter, the investigation did not escalate any further. Surely recognizing that she was under the distorted microscope of law enforcement, Sierra Day made the decision to transfer Anaya from Harbor Crest to a new daycare, one where she herself was employed. This was a preschool in Euclid called Get Ready, Set, Throw. By the time Anaya arrived at her new preschool, things had gotten much worse. Staff noticed that she appeared malnourished, sickly, and emotionally withdrawn. When confronted by her coworkers concerned that her daughter's weight was low, Sierra assured them that she was fine and had always been just a skinny child. Despite Anaya's condition that was worsening by the day, Sierra's mere presence as a teacher at Get Ready, Set, Grow facilitated an environment where she was able to better disguise the violence. Anaya's transition out of Harbor Crest and into her mother's workplace essentially shielded caregivers from properly documenting her daughter's injuries. It became a place where supervision was even more minimal. That fact was ultimately proven in January of 2018. Cleveland PD's investigation into Sierra Day was closed altogether. The case against her was somehow deemed unsubstantiated. Despite hospital visits, photographic evidence, witness accounts, and even statements from Anaya herself, the 4-year-old was allowed to remain in a dangerous environment behind the closed doors at her mother's apartment. What happened over the next few weeks went ignored until it was far too late. The social worker who had visited the home had scheduled a follow-up meeting for March 9, 2018, but Sierra postponed it to March 12th. And tragically for Anaya, that day never came. On March 11, 2018, Deontay Lewis called 911 to report that Anaya had fallen from the toilet and was having trouble breathing. After nearly 4 minutes, Sierra took the phone, informing the operator that she had put her hand to Anaya's nose and that there was no air coming out. When the dispatcher ordered Sierra to administer CPR, there was no indication that either of the two adults followed her instructions. The dispatcher also noted how both Deontay and Sierra remained abnormally calm for the duration of the call. When paramedics arrived, they immediately noticed the heavy stench of bleach. In addition, Anaya's mattress had been stripped of its bedding, aside from one small fleece blanket, and smelled strongly of urine. Police also found court papers regarding Michael Garrett's custody battle torn up and thrown in the trash. Authorities also noticed a scarcity of food in the home, aside from 2 half-eaten Chipotle bowls discovered in the microwave. But the worst discovery is when 4-year-old Anaya was found dressed in winter clothing, lying on the floor underneath an air conditioner. It was a cold day in March, and the presence of a running air conditioner struck the first responders as bizarre. It appeared evident that Sierra and Deontay had tried to disguise the smell of human decay by keeping the child's body cool. In addition, Anaya was found nowhere near the toilet Deontay and Sierra initially reported her falling from. Rigor mortis had already set in, indicating that she had been dead for several hours. Her lips were cracked and her face was pale, showing clear signs of prolonged neglect. She was severely emaciated, with her small body resembling that of a skeleton, with her vertebrae and hip bones protruding from her small winter coat. Anaya's face also bore a deep, dark bruise that had caused one eye to swell shut. A laceration above the same eye was also visible. Additional bruises, cuts, and burns were witnessed across her entire body, along with areas of her skin that had begun to droop and fall from her tiny frame due to severe loss of fat and muscle tissue. Anaya's knees and lower leg showed signs of bed sores as well, indicating that she had been confined to one position for extended periods. When questioned by police at home, the couple claimed that Anaya had fallen off the toilet that morning and hit her head, rendering her unconscious. Sierra also noted that Anaya hadn't eaten since the previous Thursday, roughly 4 days before, after becoming ill from a meal at a local Red Lobster. However, what Sierra's brother later told police suggested that Anaya had gone without food for much longer. In February of 2018, Sierra's brother Isaiah Day visited the apartment only to find Anaya lying immobile on a bed. When he asked if she was okay, Sierra casually replied yeah, completely dismissing her daughter's alarming condition. She went on to nonchalantly explain to her brother that Anaya hadn't been eating much, a vast understatement given the fact that Anaya had allegedly already lost all function of her legs. Despite a clear sense of urgency, Isaiah failed to notify the police and only revealed this information when he was questioned following Anaya's death. Investigators also learned that on February 21st, Sierra contacted local authorities, not regarding her daughter, but to report her laptop stolen. When deputies arrived at the home, Deontay answered the door. Police never went inside, but had they, a starving Anaya more than likely would have been found. Following these grim discoveries, Sierra and Deontay were both arrested. During her interrogation, Sierra admitted that Anaya began showing flu-like symptoms on March 8 and had been vomiting all day after the meal at Red Lobster. She went on to say that she and Deontay tried feeding her multiple items, including soup and Tylenol, but her symptoms persisted. Despite not being able to keep down a sip of ginger ale, Sierra confessed that she believed Anaya was faking an illness, even going as far as to say that her daughter, and I quote, scared herself to the point of causing her own death. After giving her daughter a bath, Sierra told detectives that Anaya said she was sleepy. Hours later, Sierra finally decided to call a 24-hour health hotline, but never once sought medical attention for her daughter, who was slowly dying inside her apartment. Throughout her interrogation, Sierra attempted to blame Deontay for her child's death, claiming he was responsible for feeding the child, not her, and contested the medical care Anaya desperately needed. Sierra also alleged that Deontay had beaten Anaya on several occasions and was known to use a belt during these instances. Following their respective police interviews, Sierra and Deontay were charged with murder, aggravated murder, felonious assault, permitting CA, endangering children, and tampering with evidence. Upon recovering CCTV footage from local businesses in the area, surveillance footage showed that night before Anaya's death, Sierra and Deontay were seen dining at a Chipotle restaurant, where they proceeded to enjoy burrito bowls together. Later, the two were seen shopping at a nearby Walmart. Their 4-year-old daughter lay gravely ill at home. They were later witnessed purchasing snacks and other household items, including cleaning supplies, while Anaya lay dying. An autopsy later performed by Cuyahoga County Chief Deputy Medical Examiner, Dr. Joseph Fellow, confirmed the harrowing details surrounding Anaya's death. The examination pointed toward evidence of prolonged neglect and severe injuries spanning weeks. It was determined that Anaya weighed just 26 pounds at the time of her death, placing her in the 3rd percentile for her age. The medical examiner was also able to determine that the bruise on the right side of Anaya's forehead was approximately 1 week old, and that the black eye had been sustained roughly 2 days before her death. Phatisha was also found around her eyes, further evidence of her prolonged suffering before death. The autopsy also revealed a cerebral infarction caused by a subdural hematoma, consistent with blunt force trauma to the head. This hematoma had developed over weeks, leading to extensive brain damage, and a stroke that affected the left side of her brain, which controls the right side of the body. This trauma resulted in paralysis, impaired speech, and a decline in motor function. Dr. Fellow also documented signs of starvation, noting that Anaya's body had begun to consume itself. Her stomach lining showed ulcers from prolonged acid exposure due to a lack of food. Her pancreas was inflamed, and her lungs exhibited signs of collapse. The cumulative findings led Dr. Fellow to rule her cause of death as cerebral infarction due to blunt impacts to the head, with malnutrition as a significant contributing factor. Her manner of death was immediately classified as homicide. Upon analyzing the suspect's cell phones, authorities recovered a tape of Sierra and Deontay that was recorded at 3:28 p.m. on March 10, 2018, the day before Anaya's death. This was just one more disturbing detail, knowing that the 4-year-old was nearing her final moments, lying hopelessly in the other room. Justice for Anaya would finally come at trial when opening arguments began on February 28, 2019. The proceedings exposed the undeniable depth of the cruelty the little girl had endured long before she was left to die inside her mother's apartment. During the trial, the defense attempted to suggest that Anaya's injuries were either accidental or caused by external factors. However, their explanations were contradicted by the overwhelming medical evidence and a total of 37 testimonies from witnesses, including daycare workers, first responders, social workers, family members, and more. The paramedics on scene that fateful day took the stand, recounting Anaya's emaciated state to the jury. Additionally, the surveillance footage of Sierra and Deontay casually eating at local restaurants and shopping for bleach at Walmart were also presented in court. Those present in the courtroom noted that Sierra showed little emotion throughout the entirety of the trial, even when the graphic photos of Anaya's body were shown in the projector screen. This lack of visible remorse was cited by prosecutors as further evidence of both hers and her co-defendant's callousness. One of the most impactful moments at trial was the emotional testimony of Anaya's biological father, Michael Garrett. Michael graciously described his love for his daughter and his relentless but fruitless efforts to protect her. Michael also spoke about the last time he saw his daughter alive. During a supervised visit, he noticed how frail and withdrawn she was, a stark contrast to the bright and energetic little girl that he knew. He testified that Anaya's demeanor had changed drastically in her mother's custody, and even more so when Deontay came into her life. On the stand, Michael expressed his frustration with the state, a system solely responsible for protecting children, as well as the unwarranted restraining order Sierra had filed against him, which legally limited access to Anaya during a critical period where her life was clearly in danger. In the end, both Sierra Day and Deontay Lewis were convicted on all charges. During sentencing, the judge described the actions of both defendants as inhumane and unfathomable, emphasizing that Anaya's death was entirely preventable. As a result of the court proceedings, 24-year-old Sierra Day received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, while 27-year-old Deontay Lewis was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Anaya's death forced the state of Ohio to confront its own negligence, and outrage turned to action as community members called for reform. Michael Garrett filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Cuyahoga County Department of Children and Family Services, which alleged gross negligence and failure to protect Anaya despite repeated reports of violence and neglect. It detailed breakdowns in the system that allowed Anaya to remain in not one, but two state-regulated child care facilities. While the lawsuit sought financial compensation, more importantly, it aimed to bring attention to the urgent need for reform within CPS. Michael's legal team argued that had the state followed through on its duty to investigate and intervene, Anaya would still be alive today. As a result of an external investigation, the internal disciplinary letters and failed investigative efforts by local law enforcement came into focus, highlighting the gross lapses in oversight and protocol. The letters specifically drew attention to the blatant ignorance of Anaya's caseworkers, who repeatedly failed to follow up on allegations of violence, perform thorough investigations, or document key findings in compliance with agency policies. Among the findings were the multiple reports from Harborcrest Daycare detailing visible injuries on Anaya that were dismissed without proper investigation. The little to no collaboration between caseworkers and other professionals such as police, medical personnel, and daycare staff to verify the consistency of the allegations, and finally, that supervisors failed to ensure their teams adhere to protocols for handling suspected CA cases. This failure ultimately cost Anaya her life. At the end of the investigation into the agency, multiple employees were disciplined while others were terminated. As a result, CPS was forced to implement significant policy changes aimed at preventing similar tragedies involving children in the future. Additionally, the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services took significant action against the two daycare centers connected to Anaya's death, causing both Harborcrest Child Care and Get Ready, Set, Grow Preschool to close their doors indefinitely. As for Anaya's father, Michael Garrett, he was awarded a total of $3 million in damages in June of 2020, a decision that underscored the state's accountability and failure to protect 4-year-old Anaya Day Garrett. Anaya's life was commemorated with a farewell spanning 2 days. On Friday, March 16, 2018, a viewing was held from noon until 7 p.m., allowing loved ones and members of the community to pay their respects. Her father, Michael Garrett, tearfully reflected on her joy and innocence, describing her as a light in this world whose story must never be forgotten. The following day, on Saturday, March 17th, Anaya's funeral took place at River of Life Ministries in Euclid, Ohio. Attendees watched as her tiny pink casket adorned with a tiara traveled through the streets of Euclid in a horse-drawn carriage. It was both a celebration of her short life and a heartbreaking reminder of her tragic death. Her funeral not only honored her memory, but also served as a call for accountability to protect other children. Deontay Lewis later appealed his conviction and life sentence, arguing that his trial was unfair and that the evidence presented did not support the jury's findings. However, in 2022, the Ohio Court of Appeals denied his appeal, and both his conviction and sentence were upheld. It is beyond heart-wrenching to reflect on how Anaya Day Garrett, at only 4 years old, found the courage to speak up for herself repeatedly, bravely telling the adults in her life that she was in danger. From daycare workers to her father, she voiced the harm she experienced at home, pointing to her injuries and outwardly naming the source of her pain. Tragically, those cries for help were overlooked, ignored, or dismissed entirely. The system set in place to protect her simply failed her. Often, people highlight this one tragic fact involving child victims at the hands of their parents. That is that a child often cannot advocate for themselves or properly seek help. However, Anaya did everything in her power to advocate for herself. She knew she was in danger. She knew what her mother and her mother's boyfriend was doing to her was wrong. But as we've seen so many times, even when a child does try to seek help, many people do not take it seriously, especially those whose responsibility is to protect children in need. By the time anybody listened, it was too late. The vibrant little girl who had fought so hard to be heard has left silence forever. Anaya's story stands as a devastating reminder of the cost of inaction by the powers that be. Through the tireless efforts of her father and community advocates, Anaya's story continues to inspire change, a testament of hope that no child will ever suffer in silence again. Case 2. Maya Rudd was born in the early morning hours of October 12, 2023 in Owensboro, Kentucky. She was the fourth and youngest child born to Tesla Tucker and Cage Rudd. Her oldest sibling was about 6 years older, but the other two were barely toddlers when Maya was born. Maya's family called her Smiley due to her toothless baby smile, which was a common sight in the Tucker Rudd home. Her siblings were enamored with their new baby sister. Maya was especially close with her brother, who was a little over a year older than she was. He always knew how to make her laugh. By the time she was 8 months old, she was close to crawling and sitting up on her own. She had tufts of brown hair and green eyes. Maya was described as an ambitious and willing mind, tiny toes and a smile that was contagious, a beacon of hope, a bundle of sunshine from the very start. But while all seemed perfect from the outside, there were plenty of signs from the very start that Maya was in immediate danger. Tesla Tucker and Cage Rudd were married in January of 2015. Their first child, a girl, was born in the summer of 2017. They had a boy in 2021 and a girl in 2022, and finally Maya in 2023. Now, the couple were not well liked in their community. They lived in Reynolds Station, an unincorporated area in Kentucky, about 25 miles from Owensboro. Along with their general bad attitudes, it's said that Tesla and Cage were known for their reckless driving around the community. One resident claims they stole parts from his friend's car. The extended Tucker Rudd family were all known to the justice system. Maya's father Cage and grandfather Ricky Smith were both felons. Cage was previously charged for possessing and promoting illegal substances, and he pled guilty in March of 2024. Instead of serving time in custody, he was under supervised diversion for 1 year. Ricky also had previous drug offenses and was charged for violating his parole conditions. Her other grandfather, David Tucker, had court fines that went unpaid. Maya's maternal grandmother, Talitha Tucker, had theft and check fraud charges filed against her in Indiana. She evaded these charges by not showing up to her court dates. She was also charged for failure to maintain liability insurance in 2003, which she only served 5 days of a 180-day sentence. In October of 2023, Maya's paternal grandmother, Billy Smith, was involved in a DV incident with another man, notably not her husband, Ricky Smith. This man claimed to be her intimate partner for about 8 months. They were outside his home when he claims Billy wanted money and the keys to his truck, which he refused to give her. He claims Billy hit and kicked his head and body and eventually knocked him unconscious. He was hospitalized for his wounds, and the next day, someone reported a woman asleep in a car to the police. When they arrived to check on her, they realized it was Billy. She admitted to getting into the altercation, but claimed it was self-defense on her part. She said the man had attempted to beat her with a wooden baseball bat. Billy wasn't detained on the spot, but she would eventually have an arrest warrant for second-degree assault filed against her. Neither parent nor any of her grandparents made any progress towards a better path. They evaded consequences instead of facing them. At any point, these people could have been taken into custody, leaving the young children in the hands of more dangerous family members or even the foster care system. Not everyone in the Tucker Rudd Smith extended family was involved in illegal activities, but it seemed Tesla and Cage didn't see their clean record relatives as proper caretakers. Maya's 3 siblings were each taken from their parents' home at separate times due to their living conditions. They were placed in their maternal grandparents' custody, but Maya remained with Tesla and Cage. The process to remove her began soon after she was born, but it wasn't swift enough. Social services had Maya on their radar early on, when her umbilical cord tested positive for crystal. It was then that they began the process of removing her from her parents' custody. They tried the traditional ways, but they were ignored. Every time social services tried to contact Tesla and Cage, their calls were unanswered. Visiting their Reynolds Station home was just as unuseful. They tried reaching out to the extended family, but they either could not or would not help them. The Cabinet of Health and Family Services, or CHFS, had the power to reach out to the Kentucky State Police. There was enough reason to believe Maya was in immediate danger, and having police resources on their side could have definitely helped speed up the process. The police would later say that the CHFS never asked for their aid in finding Maya. When asked directly what their search efforts looked like, they said they could not answer because of the ongoing investigation. A friend of Tesla and Cage, Brody Payne, moved onto the property around December of 2023. He lived in a trailer with the VIN number removed. Ricky Smith was also living with him, but this wasn't your normal couch surfing situation. For months, Tesla and Cage were dealing illegal drugs from their home in Reynolds Station with Ricky and Brody's help. They did this with Maya in plain view. Brody had some criminal charges in Indiana, most notably for possession of 28 or more grams of crystal in December of 2016. A court order stated that under no circumstances could the Tucker Rudd children visit their parents' house. However, the court order was violated enough times for illegal substances to eventually show up in the older children's hair. In the late spring and midsummer of 2024, the Kentucky State Police were investigating drug traffickers in every county of the state. They called this Operation Summer Heat, which received wide press coverage by Kentucky-based news. Louisiana and Alaska, inspired by Kentucky, had their own Operation Summer Heats in the following months. By July, they made over 200 arrests and just under 500 criminal charges. The monetary value of the seized contraband totaled $684,953.50, along with additional cash, weapons, and other contraband also taken in evidence. The operation was partially credited to the decrease in violent crimes and fatal ODs in the state of Kentucky by the end of 2024. Tesla, Cage, Ricky, and Brody were not as slick as they thought they were. They handled their operation recklessly, having their goods mailed to them through the United States Postal Service. It was only a matter of time before they would be caught. But unfortunately, as you soon will see, it was not the drug trafficking that made them infamous in the state of Kentucky. Fairly early into their operation, a detection dog with the Davis County Sheriff's Office took interest in a package that was set for delivery. Officers noted the recipient, Brody Payne, and tested the package for illegal substances. Inside was a half-pound of crystal. Someone was mailing illegal drugs to the Postal Service straight into Brody's lap, and law enforcement were going to find out why. Their investigation into him lasted for months, and eventually led them straight to his residence and his accomplices. Officers pulled into the Reynolds Station home driveway and delivered the package. When Brody came outside to pick it up, he was arrested on the spot. He already had a warrant out for his arrest for failing to make child support payments, but that was nothing compared to the drug charges. Brody could not play dumb because there was a second package meant for him that the police seized. It had counterfeit drugs containing fentanyl and a powder-cutting agent. One package looks bad, but two looks worse. He was booked into the Davis County Detention Center on May 20th and charged with first-degree crystal trafficking, aggravated fentanyl trafficking, and purchase and possession of drug paraphernalia. His cash bond was set at $35,000. Maya was last seen by her extended family in April of 2024. In early June, Tesla's sister, Alexis, heard from grandmother Talitha that CPS had taken Maya away. Talitha believed this, or at least she pretended to. Alexis, however, was not convinced and contacted law enforcement for a wellness check for her 8-month-old niece. But per usual, the parents weren't home and nobody could get in contact with them. Investigators spoke to Talitha. She told them her daughter said that Maya was taken away by CPS on May 1st. Detectives followed this lead, but there were no records from CPS backing up the story. Brody was arrested in connection to a drug operation in the Reynolds Station home, and for nothing involving Maya's disappearance. But it didn't take long for police to put together that Brody was maintaining his illegal drug operation in the home of a missing infant. They thought that maybe there was a connection, and they were right. On June 6th, Tesla, Cage, and Ricky were found in a Super 8 motel with what law enforcement described as a multitude of really heavy street drugs. The room was in Cage's name. When investigators opened the door, Tesla was sitting on the bed with suspected fentanyl-laced pills within reach and in plain view. She also had crystal stowed away in her purse. Ricky was on the couch next to a glass pipe and had crystal in his pockets. All three of them were arrested, and upon being questioned, they said they didn't know where Maya was. The trio were charged with child abandonment along with drug possession. They were taken into custody at the Davis County Detention Center and held on $20,000 cash bonds. This is the same jail that Brody was in. During the booking process, Cage had weed confiscated from him. He claimed he had forgotten that he had it on him. The next day, the three had additional charges filed against them involving organized crime, CA, and drug trafficking. Ricky was also charged with owning firearms as a felon and named as a persistent felony offender. On June 9th, detectives visited Billy Smith in search of Maya. The baby wasn't with her grandmother, but Billy was brought into custody anyway due to the outstanding arrest warrants against her from October of 2023. If that wasn't bad enough, another man was arrested the moment officers pulled onto the property. This man, Timothy Roach, was arrested for trying to hide a prescription-only substance under a car. He had a long history of drug offenses prior to this arrest on the 9th. Both he and Billy were booked into the Ohio County Detention Center. The next day, Tesla, Cage, and Ricky had their arraignment hearing for the drug charges against them overseen by Judge Misty Miller of the 6th Judicial District. Later, Tesla and Cage were arraigned for Maya's abandonment and other drug charges by Judge Gregory Vincent of the 38th Judicial District. Ricky and Timothy were also arraigned before Judge Vincent the very same day. Since Maya was a vulnerable, helpless baby less than 1 year old, locating her was obviously top priority. They scoured the wooded area surrounding her parents' house and the nearby cemetery. They pulled out all the stops, even bringing out cadaver dogs and publishing a tip line. Neighbors and members of the community joined the search effort. They didn't care much for Tesla and Cage, and most people didn't even know they had a fourth infant child. But they were willing to put their dislike on hold while the baby girl was missing. On June 12th, law enforcement returned to the home of Maya's maternal grandparents, David and Talitha Tucker, with a search warrant. Once again, Maya was not there, but the couple was arrested for their unrelated outstanding warrants. As we mentioned earlier, Talitha had theft and fraud charges against her in the state of Indiana, and David had unpaid court fines. They were held in the Davis County Detention Center. Police also took their electronics into evidence. Maya's sisters and brother were promptly whisked away to safety. The following day, Brody Payne had more charges filed against him. In addition to the possession of illegal substances, he was charged with trafficking them, participating in organized crime, and wanton endangerment. Neither Tesla nor Cage cooperated with detectives. They insisted Maya was taken away by child services. They sent officers on a fool's errand despite knowing exactly what happened to their baby. The grandparents didn't help either, and the extended family were completely in the dark. This period of uncertainty frightened the community. They thought they lived in a safe place with kind neighbors, so Maya's disappearance shook them to their core. There was no evidence of Maya being alive or dead. If it was the latter, law enforcement suspected she would be in the wooded area behind her parents' home, or in a nearby cemetery on a hill. They failed to find anything with the cadaver dogs alone, so they made plans to return with more specialized equipment. The Ohio County Coroner's Office also joined in the efforts. Horry King, the public affairs officer for the Kentucky State Police, made it clear that the coroner's office's involvement didn't necessarily mean that Maya was dead. However, he didn't mince words with the press. He said, "We're very hopeful and optimistic that we would find her alive. Maybe perhaps a family member has her, but the longer this goes on, the more grim it seems." He also said this case was an example of how illicit street drugs can destroy lives and cause the erosion of our community. Officer King also criticized the family for their uncooperative behavior throughout the investigation, saying, "It's completely sad that you have a family that goes this deep in the family tree that's not willing to cooperate with the baby's investigation. It's saddening, and I can't say that I've quite seen it like this before." At 1:15 p.m. on June 14th, 1 week after she went missing, Maya was found. She hadn't gone far. In fact, she was still in her home. Law enforcement found a black Adidas duffel bag in the entry room of the house. There was some debris over the bag indicating an attempt to hide it. Officers opened the bag, and everyone's worst fears came true. Maya was already decomposing. She was so unrecognizable that no one could even tell if it was her. A transport vehicle brought her to the Louisville Regional Office of the Medical Examiner for further investigation. You didn't need to be an expert detective to see that the Reynolds Station house was not suitable for a child, much less an infant. The residence was filthy and dangerous, with illegal substances, paraphernalia, and weapons found by investigators. One officer found a bag tainted with crystal only inches away from Maya's crib. Initial searches left the property largely undisturbed, but there were so many illegal drugs and residue inside the house that the police were worried their officers would OD just from staying inside the house for too long. Investigators had to take several precautions before searching the interior. This included sterilizing the house before performing the search. It took multiple search warrants and visits from the police to get the house safe enough for a thorough investigation. It's not reported how or if this affected the crime scene, but it demonstrates how bad the environment was. If the police were worried for the health and safety of their trained officers, imagine what that house could do to an 8-month-old infant girl. In total, 8 people were arrested during the search for Maya. Her parents, Tesla and Cage; maternal grandparents, Talida and David; paternal grandparents, Ricky and Billy, along with Brody Payne and Timothy Roach. After the remains were confirmed to belong to Maya, 4 of those 8 arrested were charged for her mistreatment and abandonment: Tesla Tucker, Cage Rudd, Ricky Smith and Brody Payne. Maya's cause of death is still undetermined even after all the time that has passed. Her body was too decomposed for medical professionals to come to an accurate conclusion. Despite this, the coroner's office labeled her death a homicide. The state coroner's office said in their report, "Based on information provided to me and post-mortem examination findings, the cause of death in this 8-month-old female, Maya Rudd, is undetermined. The advanced state of decomposition precluded an optimum examination. Given the scene, circumstances and autopsy findings, the manner of death is best classified as homicide." More detailed results wouldn't come until months later. It would eventually be made public that Maya had crystal in her system even after her death. To be precise, 23.3 nanograms per milliliter. Maya's aunt Alexis organized a GoFundMe to help pay for Maya's funeral, which was held on July 25th. There were speeches, live music, prayers, and a sermon. The service is archived on the Glen Funeral Home's website. Tesla, Cage, Ricky, and Brody were all initially charged for drug possession, drug trafficking, and firearm possession. After Maya was found on June 14th, the 4 were also charged for her death. These were not murder charges, at least not yet. The charges ranged from failure to report a child's death, mishandling her corpse, endangerment, and criminal CA. During the June 17th preliminary hearing, Tesla cried in the courtroom as the charges were read, and cried even more as the hearing went on. In total, Tesla was found guilty for 10 charges, while the 3 men were found guilty of 13 charges each. Their 3 extra charges were for firearm possession despite being convicted felons. In November, the state of Kentucky filed more charges against Talida: controlled substance endangerment to a child, criminal abuse, and hindering prosecution. Talida allowed the children to stay with their dangerous parents in an unsafe environment, as noted earlier. She also gave Tesla and Cage money she had previously stolen for safekeeping to limit her chances of being arrested for theft. This possibly circles back to the theft and fraud she committed in Indiana. While the coroner's office labeled Maya's case a homicide, the trial was not a homicide case. It took some time, roughly 6 months, for the DNA evidence collected at the scene to be thoroughly tested. Finally, in January of 2025, investigators were confident enough in their findings to increase the charges against the 4 convicted adults. The Kentucky State Police presented a new case in an Ohio County courtroom. The result was the addition of murder charges to the 4 convicted parties in addition to charges they already were found guilty for. The police successfully argued the 4 adults knowingly put Maya in a dangerous situation, if not directly harming her. In addition, the 4 were accused of criminal mistreatment of Maya's 3 older siblings. Following the presentation, a superseding indictment was filed against the 4 adults. This means that the charges against them were amended based on the new evidence presented in court. The superseding indictment listed extra charges for each of the 4 convicted adults: 1 count of murder for Maya, and 1 count of criminal abuse of a child 12 and under for Maya and each of her 3 siblings. In addition, Ricky was charged with persistent felony offender. Tesla, Ricky and Brody pled not guilty to the new charges of murder and endangerment on February 4, 2025. Tesla's attorney filed a motion to examine and test any evidence seized by law enforcement. Cage was meant to appear alongside them, but his arraignment was pushed to March 4th. He, Tesla and Ricky will appear again in court in April and Brody Payne in May. They are each held on separate $250,000 cash bonds. Now we should also note here, since they haven't fully gone to trial, all parties are considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. During and after Maya's case, some alarming actions were taken in Kentucky's Cabinet for Health and Family Services. Today, the Kentucky Auditor's Office houses the Kentucky Commonwealth Office of Ombudsman. Before this, it was under CHFS control. In cases where child protection investigation proves inadequate, it's the Ombudsman's job to investigate the how and the why. According to Allison Ball, the public auditor, the Ombudsman relies heavily on a database called ITWIST to perform these investigations. The Ombudsman had full access to ITWIST previously while it was under CHFS authority, but when it transitioned to the public auditor's office, the Cabinet refused to give them this access. This was in July of 2024, a month after Maya's name was published on every major news outlet in the state. The Auditor's Office and the Office of the Ombudsman filed a lawsuit against the Cabinet for this. It was worth the effort in the end. September 2024, the Ombudsman regained access to the ITWIST database and could resume their usual duties. More recently, a bill advanced that would protect the Ombudsman's access to ITWIST. During this dispute between CHFS and the Auditor's Office, a more helpful and hopeful piece of legislation was in the works. The same day Maya was found, a Kentucky man named Eric Williams created a petition on change.org. Eric Williams has no relation to Maya, but he was so upset, frustrated, and heartbroken by her story that he wanted to see some changes come from it. Eric proposed the creation of a new law called Maya's Law. If a parent or parents lose custody of children and haven't regained that custody, they would not be allowed to keep a newborn in their care. The petition received over 2,000 signatures within the first 5 days alone, and is currently at just under 8,600. Eric told news station WPSD Local 6 News, "I can't go buy a car if I didn't pay for my last car, can I, right? I can't go adopt a dog if I was found of animal abuse, but how come I can leave with a brand new baby when I lost my previous ones?" Eric made it clear he didn't want to separate families, but to protect vulnerable children like Maya and her siblings. The people's call for action did not go unheard. Kentucky State Representative Myron Dossett sponsored Baby Maya's Law, officially called House Bill 574. It was approved by the House Standing Committee on February 20th, 2025, and will be brought before the main floor for further approval. Currently, the wording of the bill states, if anyone knows of a child born to a parent or parents who have A, lost custody of other children and haven't regained that custody, or B, have ongoing cases of mistreatment of children against them, they must report those parents to the authorities. 2023, before Maya's passing, discussions for a similar bill began, but ultimately never came to fruition. One of the parties involved was Heather Gray, executive director of the Joy Closet, a non-profit organization that aids Kentucky's foster children. Representative Dossett was also part of the discussions for this earlier bill, so Heather was easily able to reach out to him about Baby Maya's Law. While it is sad it took the death of an 8-month-old little girl for such measures to be taken at all, Heather and the others at the Joy Closet are grateful to see change being made. Representative Dossett said about the bill, "When a child is born to parents who already have their children in someone else's custody due to neglect or abuse, the state should intervene and ensure that the child is safe and cared for. I believe in second chances, but there is no second chance for a child who passes away due to abuse or neglect. We have to put children's safety first and ensure that the parents are proactively changing their lives for the better before any child, especially a newborn, is returned to their custody." The 3 older children are now in the care of their aunt Alexis and her boyfriend John. In an interview with WPSD Local 6 News, Alexis recalled the day she learned that Maya was found, and they told me they found her. I was like, okay, is she okay? And it was not okay. She wasn't okay, and I lost a little piece of me that day. It was hard. They intend to raise Maya's siblings in their home with their own children. Alexis and John shared the following with reporters. "They deserve way better than they have been given, and I want to give them the best life that they deserve. Alexis and John elected to take on her sister's 3 kids, Maya's siblings, to raise along with their own. The goal, to hopefully make them a permanent fixture. We may not be their actual parents, but we will fill that void. We're going to love them like we're their actual parents. We're going to make sure that, they are taken care of. They get the best education possible. They get to do whatever they want to do. And they can just enjoy their life as kids. They don't deserve this. Case 3. Tabasha was born on January 8, 1981 in Bakersfield, California, to parents Gwendolyn Page Crowells and Willie Johnson. She was 30 years old at the time of our story. Jordan Criado's family, however, had abandoned him long before our story took place. Jordan was born in 1960 and was 21 years older than his wife. Tabasha and her mother shared a close bond. Gwendolyn recalled how her daughter would often call her late at night to talk and crack jokes. Gwendolyn would also sing songs with her grandchildren while on the phone. Jordan and Tabasha had 4 children. They welcomed their first, Elijah, on February 24, 2004, followed by Isaac, born just over a year later on February 27, 2005. The third youngest, Andrew, was born on May 12, 2006, and finally, Aurora was born on January 13, 2009. Aurora was their only daughter, and all 3 boys carried their father's first name as their middle name. All 4 children were reported to have special needs, and Tabasha herself struggled with mental illness, specifically bipolar disorder. Elijah, who was 7 at the time of our story, was known by his teachers as having an innate ability to craft and construct sophisticated toys. He would give toys he created to other students, and he also enjoyed making art projects for his siblings. 6-year-old Isaac was also creative and artistic. He was above his grade level in reading and writing, and had an obsession with Thomas the Tank Engine. 5-year-old Andrew, the youngest boy, was still in Head Start. He was more focused on toys, and enjoyed superhero action figures like Iron Man and Spider-Man. He also enjoyed playing with Hot Wheels cars. 2-year-old Aurora, the youngest and still very much the baby of the family, was an early Head Start. She was said to have loved Barbie dolls. 12-year-old Madison Grease, who had babysat for the Criado family, said of the children, they were all very loving. The boys were hyper, but they listened to me really good. She said of their parents, Tabby was really nice. I got a good vibe off her. Dad was kind of creepy. Tabasha had met Jordan at a community college in Bakersfield, California, after she had gotten out of the Navy. She married him despite knowing he had been sentenced to 20 years in prison in December of 1989 for the essay of his ex-wife's 3 daughters in Sacramento County. Jordan had been arrested and pled guilty in August of 1990 to 8 counts of lewd and acts with a child under 14. Jordan had also gone back to jail at one point for 91 days for failing to register as an offender, which he was required to do by law no matter where he lived. Jordan's reputation was permanently stained, and for very good reason. It was no secret to the public that he committed such heinous acts against young children. Offenders on the registry are usually quite easy to look up. Despite knowing this, Tabasha still chose to be with him. According to those that knew her, Tabasha wasn't threatened by what Jordan had done in his past. Tabasha's brother, Jesse Adams, also felt that Jordan had served his time in prison, and by doing so, in his words, had paid his debt to society for his actions. Jordan moved his new family to the state of Oregon to get away from his ex-wife's family, as well as anyone else who knew why he'd been in prison. They first settled in Central Point, but they were soon evicted from their home after Jordan lost his job at a local factory. They then moved to Medford, where Tabasha enrolled at another community college to continue her education, and Jordan worked out of their home fixing cars. The family settled into a house located at 1027 West 10th Street, but the Criado household wasn't a healthy one. According to their neighbors, Jordan and Tabasha seemed to have frequent arguments, but nothing physical or aggressive. Child Protective Services had also been called to their address in the past, but the reasons why were not publicly known. Some neighbors reported hearing a loud fight on Sunday, July 17, 2011. It was no secret that Tabasha had intended to divorce Jordan. She had expressed her intentions to do so to her family and friends frequently. That evening, Tabasha stayed out all night and Jordan reported her missing early Monday morning. According to Medford Police Chief Tim George, officers located her later that morning at a local Minute Mart. Surveillance videos showed Tabasha standing at the cash register at 7:46 a.m. According to store clerk Lori Groh, she was talking calmly on her cell phone when she came into the store. She bought 3 fruit-flavored cigar wrappers for 89 cents each, and then sat at a table. Tabasha was dressed in a black cap, black sweatshirt, black pants, and white running shoes. She appeared to be texting on her phone. Then she looked outside and smiled broadly before walking out to join the police officers who had been looking for her. They gave her a ride home, and according to the officers, she didn't appear frightened or nervous before they left her home with Jordan. At 9:23 a.m. the same day, just an hour after Tabasha returned home, neighbor Calvin Kennedy called 911 after he could see what appeared to be smoke coming from the Criado home. Calvin had pounded on the door, trying to get a response from the family, but got no answer. When officials arrived, smoke was now pouring out from the residence. Dozens of firefighters, police and ambulance crews had arrived on the scene to help put out the blaze and rescue the family. Firefighters had to forcefully break into the home because the door had been deadbolt shut. The living room couch was placed against the front door, and the back sliding glass doors were locked from the inside with a wooden dowel. Police said that the fire, which was considered to be arson, had been started in several locations around the house. The first victim was evacuated from the home 16 minutes after the 911 call was placed, last a few minutes later at 9:43 a.m. First responders worked in an average attempt to resuscitate the family in their front yard. The lawn resembled a war zone made into an emergency triage unit as rescue personnel searched for pulses, removed their bloody clothing, and performed CPR. First responders discovered stab wounds on Tabasha and all of the 3 little boys. They were able to get a pulse on 2 of the children at the scene. They were later pronounced dead at the hospital. Tabasha and her 4 children were gone. Jordan was the only member of the family that survived. He was taken to the hospital unconscious from smoke inhalation. Police quickly zeroed in on the father to be the sole perpetrator and made plans to arrest him as soon as he was well enough to leave the hospital. One firefighter told investigators that when they located Jordan, he was holding a bloody kitchen knife. The entire family was found in the master bedroom while the firefighters entered the building to pull them out. The master bedroom was where one of the 4 fires had been set. At autopsy, authorities uncovered chilling evidence. Jordan had given the 4 children large doses of melatonin before the violence took place. Aurora, the youngest of the children, had 4 times the recommended dose in her system. Giving the children melatonin to lull them to sleep pointed to premeditation. He wanted them docile before he carried out his plan. As we mentioned previously, Jordan had stabbed 3 of the 4 children. Aurora was the only member of the family that was spared. Tabasha, Isaac, and Andrew died from sharp force injuries. Elijah and Aurora died from effects of the fire. Tabasha had been stabbed twice in the neck, twice in the face, and 10 times in the abdomen. That many wounds denotes a crime of passion and a complete loss of self-control. There were no defensive wounds found on Tabasha's body to show that she had fought Jordan during the attack. It's likely that the first wound was a fatal one. According to investigators, after Jordan stabbed his wife and children, he carried each of them into the master bedroom. He put 2 of the children on the bed and the other 2 on a mattress on the floor next to their mother. Jordan then got to work on setting the fires. It was reported that Jordan left the knife he used on his family on a bed in the kids' room. Evidence led police to believe that after Jordan had annihilated his family, he doused himself in the interior walls in the house with the cooking oil, specifically olive oil, which he mistakenly believed would act as an accelerant. Jordan had also turned on the stove and oven. Once the fires were burning, Jordan acquired a new knife in an attempt to remove himself from this earth. But firefighters were able to keep him alive after finding him and pulling him from the building. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital, unconscious from smoke inhalation, and remained guarded by police. He was sedated, enlisted, and in stable condition. Jordan was immediately arrested upon his discharge from the hospital. He appeared to have been put in a turtle suit during his initial court appearances, but the Jackson County Jail would not comment on whether or not he was on watch due to being a danger to himself. It would be safe to assume that he definitely was being monitored for safety, considering what his attempts were at the crime scene. Jordan's indictment listed 24 counts of aggravated murder. 20 of them were based on the fact that there were multiple victims, and 4 were due to the fact that his children were all under the age of 14. He was also indicted on 4 counts of felony murder related to 4 counts of, as well as 4 counts of manslaughter. Aggravated murder carries a potential sentence of life in prison without parole or capital punishment. Jordan and his defense attorney, Jeff Goki, put in a motion to postpone the trial until the following summer. They also submitted a motion to suppress evidence in the case, but the nature of the evidence they sought to suppress was unclear. Jordan had told authorities that when his wife came home that morning, she told him she had woken up in another man's bed and believed that she had been drugged. He claimed he went into the backyard to fix a car and later felt that something was not right. When he went into the house, he saw the fire and claimed he saw his wife standing over the children with a knife. Jordan told police he attacked Tabasha for what she had done to the children. He said, "She was a broken woman. I had no right to take her life, but I did not kill my babies. When they needed me the most, I wasn't there. I knew she was not well, but I never thought she would hurt the babies." Now, this defense is surprisingly not as uncommon as you think. Now, if you remember our coverage of the Ronnie O'Neill case, this defense from a family annihilator to say that their romantic partner was the one that killed the kids, and they finished the romantic partner off, is surprisingly not uncommon. Like Jordan, Ronnie had the same defense at trial. District Attorney Beth Heckert, however, described Jordan's behavior as selfish, controlling, and jealous, and said that he had killed his entire family and tried to remove himself from this earth rather than let his wife leave him behind for another man. Judge Mejia believed that Jordan was delusional, and that the evidence extensively showed that Jordan had killed his entire family in a fit of jealous rage after learning his wife had spent the night with another man. He had set fire to the house. He said Jordan could not or would not accept the shame of murdering his own children, so he blamed Tabasha to paint her as the unstable one and absolve himself of his guilt. Fortunately, Jordan survived and would be forced to continue living with the knowledge of what he had done for the rest of his life. Jordan eventually entered what's known as an Alford plea to 4 counts of aggravated murder and 1 of arson. That means that while he does not admit guilt, he acknowledged that there was enough evidence to convict him. The Alford plea saved the Oregon court system the hassle and the hefty cost of a lengthy trial. In return, prosecutors did not pursue capital punishment and recommended life in prison without the possibility of parole. Willie Johnson, Tabasha's biological father, who now goes by the name Marzek Zayad, was hit particularly hard by the events of the tragedy. Marzek never got to meet his youngest daughter in person. He claimed that he had an affair with her mother, but he didn't even know he had a daughter for a long time. He said that he wasn't listed on her birth certificate, but the family resemblance was clear. Tabasha's mother eventually acknowledged his paternity. Early attempts to meet his newly discovered daughter in person had failed many times. 6 months before the tragedy, Marzek had reconnected with Tabasha on Facebook. They had begun talking on the phone regularly and were working towards establishing a connection. The night before the murders, the conversation between them was about the overdue family reunion. According to Marzek, Tabasha was my baby. We were planning for me to come out for a visit. We were going to have a barbecue. The whole family was getting happy. But father and daughter never got to reconnect because of what Jordan had done. He did, however, have some happy memories to hold on to. He lovingly recalled, "The sweetest word I ever heard in my life came from Aurora's mouth. She called me Grandpa." Dressed in a black suit at Jordan's sentencing, Marzek said he himself was a victim of family violence several times over, which included the murders of his own 2 sisters. He added that Jordan was not solely to blame. He also blamed the California prison system, where Jordan did time for the essay of his first wife's daughter. The grieving father claimed that they too had a hand in what Jordan had become, saying Jordan wasn't released from prison. Jordan was unleashed on society. Marzek had a lot to say about the justice system and how it frequently fails to effectively rehabilitate inmates before they are released. Marzek had personal experience dealing with the justice system himself. He had spent several years in prison following a shooting in his California home in 1990. Marzek claimed he was trying to get his stepson's friend out of his house by scaring him with a shotgun. His friend was a gang member who brought drugs into his home. There was a struggle and the gun went off. Marzek's conviction was overturned several years later by an appeals court ruling that his case had to be retried or sentenced commuted to voluntary manslaughter. This offense carried a 10-year maximum sentence, which was less than the number of years he had already spent in prison. While Marzek's appeal was working its way through the system, he had the opportunity to speak with his fellow inmates about what brought them to prison, how to turn the violence around to lead healthier lives. He said, "I've seen all sides. I've sat with murderers on death row. They've told me things they never told their attorneys or their psychiatrists because I was in the same fix as them." Marzek was released from prison on July 18, 2002. Sadly, the 10th anniversary of his release happened to fall on the 1-year anniversary of the Criado killings. He said, "I'm just sick of all kinds of family violence. Anything I can do to stop family violence, I am ready, willing, and able to try." Tabasha's family did not want Jordan sentenced to death. According to Marzek, the death penalty won't do nothing but reward him. Tabasha's family wants Jordan to accept responsibility for what he has done and spend the remainder of his life atoning for his sins and potentially saving others from this pain. While Jordan shamefully averted his gaze, Marzek said he hoped his son-in-law would do something positive in prison to make up for his many crimes, adding, "Yes, I would like to see Jordan locked up for life, but I would like to see what he can become." Marzek urged everyone to do what they could to end family violence, stating, "You may be the next victim, and I don't want you to feel what I'm feeling. Selfishness is what got him where he is. You're responsible for the sins you do. He needs to see beyond the misery he is facing. He needs to purify his soul and make something positive come out of this. He may be able to get his sins lifted and get to paradise." Despite everything, Marzek believed in forgiveness and redemption. Jordan can be an excellent instrument in promoting programs that would help other inmates in prison not to come out and do the things he has come out and do. Tabasha's brother, Jesse Adams, also looked to his faith to make sense of this tragedy and to comfort in the idea that God had taken Tabash and her children to a better place. Jesse found guidance in the Bible as a means to forgive Jordan, such as Ephesians 4.31, which reads, "Let all bitterness, wrath, and anger, and clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all the malice, and be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving to one another, even as Christ God has forgiven us." At a news conference, Jesse shared that his family was in chaos trying to make sense of the loss, but were working on the path to forgiving Jordan. Jesse acknowledged that Jordan and Tabasha had been struggling as a couple, stating, "We knew she wanted a divorce. We knew Tabasha would work on her own time, her own pace. She obviously didn't see anything coming or felt threatened. At the end of the day, we have to trust in her decisions, the way she decided to handle things." Jesse added, "And if you guys are listening up there, we love you, Tabasha, Elijah, Isaac, Andrew, and Aurora. May the rest of your days be in happiness with God." I've been asked, what was my sister like? The first thing that comes to mind is she's extraordinary and full of life. She was wise beyond her years and a good mother, a good friend to all who knew her. No matter how bad the situation was, she always found the good in the midst of it. She was always willing to help anybody who was in need, and her kids were the driving force for the happiness in her life. She loved and cherished them like no other. We are saddened, angry, and hurt, confused, and stricken with grief over the loss of my sister and the kids. We have unanswered questions for Jordan, such as why and what can make all of this come together and happen. Although we are angry and hurt, we realize we all have to forgive him in order for us to begin to heal. In no way, no shape, no form do we agree with the actions that took place or condone it. But in order for us to heal, we must forgive. Tabasha's uncle, Melvin Page, told reporters there was even more family history that was hauntingly similar to what had happened to his niece. 28 years ago, an aunt named Carmela Page was murdered. She was stabbed 22 times by her boyfriend in Denver, Colorado. The boyfriend tried to flee but was ultimately arrested. It is no wonder that the family, especially Marza, was invested in the prevention of family violence. The family thanked the Oregon Department of Justice, first responders, and community members. Their donations helped the family pay for funeral expenses and counseling. The Page Criado Memorial Fund was set up through Bank of America, with excess donations being donated to Dunhouse Outreach. This is an organization that helps victims of family violence in Medford, Oregon. The funeral was held on Saturday, July 30th, 2011, at St. John Missionary Baptist Church in Bakersfield, California. The caskets of Tabasha Page Criado and her children were placed side by side. Hundreds of people paid their respects and condolences. They were buried and laid to rest at their final resting place of Union Cemetery. A candlelight vigil was held in Medford's Hawthorne Park. Flowers and stuffed animals were placed along the sidewalk in front of the Criado home before it was demolished in 2012. Among the mementos was a 2-page letter which reads in part, "So though we now know your name is Tabasha, to us, you'll always be the tall, beautiful black lady with the gigantic smile. Signed, your West Medford family." On the 1-year anniversary of the fire, several of Tabasha's family members shared memories of her and her children with news channel KTVL 10. Tabasha was so out of the box, always laughter. She always had jokes. Tabasha Criado's family takes a look back before the tragedy, remembering Tabasha's goofy personality. They're calling, at 1 o'clock in the morning to tell you something funny. Also on their minds, her 4 children who were taken too soon. God received 5 angels a year ago today. Just remembering the good things, the smiles and the laughter, those are the kind of things that you think about and you hold on to. But as the family tries to focus on the good times, they can't forget. It is still sad, and we're still struggling with the thought that they're not here. Tabasha's brother has spent the last year coping with the loss in his own way. Last year, Jesse Adams asked the community to forgive Jordan Criado for the crimes he suspected of. No way, no shape, no form do we agree with the actions that took place or condone it. But in order for us to heal, we must forgive. Now he's taking his feelings and moving on. He's going to school to be a paramedic. He wanted to find a way that he can also maybe save some lives or give back and do so in their memory. Family members say Tabasha and her children are in a better place. We're finding comfort that we know where they are at and we will see him again one day. Case 4. 18-year-old Mia McQuillan isn't like a lot of young women that we cover here on this channel. She was part of an affluent family and grew up in Bend, Oregon, living in a $1 million bungalow. After graduation, Mia took part in a gap year program through Cambridge, Massachusetts-based agency called EF Gap Year, which according to their website, allows students aged 18 to 22 years old to experience the world and discover your passions, build real-world skills, make lifelong memories, and return home a better you. Now, this program didn't come without a steep price tag. For this experience, you'd be expected to shell out between $19,500 to $24,750 for a semester and $43,750 for the full year. Now, for those who chose the full gap year experience, you'd get to travel all over the world. I'm not even joking. Participants would start by exploring England, France, Italy, Switzerland, Germany, and the Czech Republic before hopping a flight to Australia and then Thailand. And this was just one semester. After winter break, travelers get to enjoy 12 more weeks of adventure. Now, from what we can piece together based on that schedule and available news sources, it appears that Mia was starting her adventure during semester 2. However, she would never make it past France. Mia and her traveling companions were staying at the Ibis Styles Hotel in Paris, located off of Rue de la Croix Saint-Simon in the city's 20th district. At around 6 a.m. on Monday, February 24th, 2025, tragedy struck. Unbeknownst to her fellow travelers, Mia had been hiding a secret. She was pregnant. Although the details remain unclear at this time, several news outlets have reported that Mia gave birth to a baby in her hotel room. Rather than ask for help or contact emergency services, she did the unthinkable. Mia wrapped the newborn in a towel with the umbilical cord still attached and flung him from a second-story window where he landed in a trash can. However, some reports have claimed that the baby boy was moved to the trash can. According to a hotel worker that witnessed the events, it was still early this Monday morning. Around 6 a.m., this little piece of Paris woke up in the middle of a nightmare. I get chills just thinking about it. It's awful. She had to give birth in the room. She wrapped the baby in a towel and threw him out the window. He was still alive when he left with the emergency services, but he is dead. We wonder what happened. It must be a denial of pregnancy. A woman named Maria, who works as a caretaker in a building opposite the hotel, told reporters, and I quote, "There were police cars and ambulances. We thought it might be gang-related, but when we learned what had happened, we were devastated. I've lived here for over 30 years, and it's a quiet neighborhood with very few tourists. It's so sad." Allegedly, witnesses heard screams, which led them to contact emergency services. Although first responders rushed the baby to a Parisian children's hospital called the Necker, where they tried their absolute best to save this baby's life. Sadly, he was pronounced dead at 7:45 a.m. Mia was rushed to the Robert Debris Hospital to undergo what sources are referring to as an operation following childbirth. Afterwards, she was placed in police custody and charged with child murder. According to The Guardian, French authorities are investigating the case as a homicide of a minor younger than 15 years old. The publication also outlined that authorities are considering the possibility of what is known as pregnancy denial, a condition in which a woman remains unaware of or in denial about her pregnancy until labor. We'll get into our thoughts on that a little later in our story. The U.S. Embassy in Paris told reporters that they were aware of the situation and were closely monitoring the case and added, "We are deeply saddened to learn of the recent tragedy involving the loss of a young life." YEF Gap Year spokesman Adam Bickelman released the following statement to the New York Post, where they said the agency was, and I quote, "deeply shocked and saddened by this tragic event. We are fully cooperating with local authorities as they continue their investigation. Counseling support has been offered to all group members, and we are extending our support to the impacted families." According to the Daily Mail, Mia's story is eerily similar to that of a German woman, Katarina Jovanovic, who was found guilty of manslaughter at the Heilbronn District Court on July 3, 2024. According to the publication, Katarina flung her newborn baby out her apartment window, where she fell nearly 12 feet to the ground, all because she was worried that a baby would ruin her career as an executive at Porsche's legal department. Now, initially, Katarina admitted to her crime, but once the case went to trial, suddenly she didn't realize that she'd been pregnant the whole time. However, the prosecution wasn't buying any of it, and according to reports, accused her of murder in deliberately concealing her pregnancy from colleagues and neighbors. According to public prosecutor Marika Haffendorfer, and I quote, "The accused was not prepared to put her life plans, especially her professional advancement, on hold for a child. That was her decision when the baby was born, and as a result, the criteria for a murder conviction are fulfilled." However, Katarina's defense countered that argument. According to her defense attorney Malta Hoke, and I quote again, "It is a drama that affects me personally. My client did not even know that she was pregnant. When she suddenly held the bloody baby in her hands, she was in an exceptional psychological situation. It was an accident. She dropped the baby. How the child ended up over the window sill remains to be determined." Now, it should come as a surprise to nobody that cases like this are heavy, especially as someone who struggles with fertility issues. We've had a lot of people reach out to us over the years to tell us that they need a break from true crime or that they struggle to find a good palate cleanser. This applies to us too. So because of this, we've launched our new channel, Georgie and Druby, where we will be talking about things outside the scope of true crime, largely wacky news stories. If you're a member of a victim's family who has contacted us to cover your loved one, don't worry. This is in no way the end of the misery machine. We'll still be keeping to our normal release schedule. But to be completely transparent, when you keep seeing cases with the same exact problems and trends over and over, where a life could have been easily saved had somebody spoken up, or if CPS didn't let children fall through the cracks who were in danger with a thoroughly documented history of evidence, and it seems like nobody is doing anything about it, it can be pretty tough on your mental health. So having an outlet to make lighter content is really needed from time to time. So if you're somebody who is understandably burnt out on true crime, but still wants to stick with us for lighter topics, we'd love to see you over there. The link will be in the pinned comment and description, so you can subscribe after this video. So anyway, let's get back to it. So what is denial of pregnancy? Well, according to medical journals, it's when a woman is unaware of or unable to accept that she is pregnant. It can occur due to a number of reasons, including mental health, substance misuse, or a history of loss. Pregnancy denial is classified as either psychotic or non-psychotic. Psychotic denial is when the mother vastly misinterprets pregnancy symptoms, such as believing fetal movements are things like cancer or a blood clot. Usually women classified with psychotic denial have a history of chronic mental illness. It also isn't uncommon for women with psychotic denial to go back and forth between accepting and denying that they are pregnant. For non-psychotic denial, there are 3 subtypes, which include affective denial, which is when the mother intellectually recognizes she's pregnant, but doesn't experience the emotional changes. Those experiencing affective denial are unlikely to take care of themselves or the fetus during pregnancy. Affective denial accounts for roughly half of those who experience non-psychotic pregnancy denial. There's also pervasive denial. This is when the mother appears to be completely and utterly unaware of her pregnancy. This tends to last until the 3rd trimester, but some mothers will experience this right up to the moment of delivery. As such, some medical journals will label this as pervasive denial until delivery. Then finally, there is persistent denial. In our research, some medical journals describe persistent and pervasive denial as virtually the same thing. However, one key distinction I saw published in this article in the Journal of the Royal Society of Medicine is, and I quote, "Persistent denial occurs when women discover their pregnancy in the 3rd trimester, yet fail to seek antenatal care." Basically, A mother finds out they are pregnant in the third trimester and decides not to seek any care until they go into labor. Now, risk factors include being a young mother, having a history of psychiatric episodes, not being well educated, precarious employment, and the possibility of being a single mother. According to the same article in the Journal of the Royal Society of Medicine, and I quote, "Denial of pregnancy is more common than expected, with an incidence at 20 weeks gestation of approximately 1 in 475. The proportion of cases persisting until delivery is about 1 in 2,500. They go on to note that consequences of denial of pregnancy can include psychological distress, unassisted delivery, and neonaticide. Pregnancy denial can be difficult to predict, and it's not possible to know for certain if a woman is concealing or denying a pregnancy. In the current political climate, one might be quick to think that Mia didn't have any options. However, Mia grew up in Oregon, which has some of the most liberal laws when it comes to reproductive freedom in the country. A simple Google search will bring up these key points for you. A woman's right to choose is legal in Oregon at all stages of pregnancy. There are no restrictions on when a procedure can be performed based on gestational age. Minors do not need parental consent to terminate their pregnancy, and state Medicaid covers services. There is no mandatory waiting period before a woman can choose to terminate her pregnancy. There are laws in place to protect providers and patients from harassment and violence. Oregon's Equal Rights Amendment protects a woman's right to terminate her pregnancy. In addition, Oregon has a number of policies that make birth control accessible, including laws that allow pharmacists to prescribe birth control. Pharmacists can prescribe short-acting hormonal contraception, like the pill and the patch, without a doctor's visit. Women over 18 can start or continue birth control care with a pharmacist, and patients under 18 can continue a prescription from a clinician. Now, that can be pretty ambiguous. When I was in high school, and this was in the late 90s, students could go to the school nurse, and that counted as a clinician. Furthermore, Plan B is available without a prescription to students 17 and older, and is free to students who qualify for Oregon contraceptive care or following an assault. It's also important to note that many different brands of emergency contraception can be purchased online through Amazon. Oregon also has a law that allows anyone who qualifies to receive free sexual and reproductive health care, regardless of citizenship status. Oregon also has safe haven laws that allow parents to give up their newborns at authorized facilities without legal consequences. The law applies to infants who are 30 days old or younger and show no signs of mistreatment. These facilities include hospitals, doctors' offices, birthing clinics, police stations, sheriff's offices, and fire departments. While France does not have explicit safe haven laws, mothers can give birth anonymously and for free in a hospital if they plan to put the baby up for adoption. So the assumption that Mia was forced to do what she did simply because she had no other option is wrong. As explained, Mia not only had options, but she had many options before it got to this point. And unlike many of the previous cases that we've covered on this channel, she cannot use poverty or poor education as an excuse. Was she scared? One could reasonably assume so. But this is why parents need to be having frank and open discussions with their teenagers. That type of dialogue is what can prevent these tragedies from happening. Many of you will remember when we covered Alexi Treviso's case last year. If not, we'll be sure to link her story for you in the pinned post in the description. To recap, Alexi was a New Mexico high school senior and member of her school's cheerleading squad. Like Mia, Alexi was harboring a secret. Instead of coming clean, she went about her business as usual, cheering at basketball games, attending her senior prom with the baby's father, and getting ready to attend college at the New Mexico State University in Las Cruces in the fall. When she eventually went into labor, she still couldn't face reality. Instead of coming clean to her mother and hospital staff, both of whom were concerned for her well-being, Alexi gave birth in a bathroom stall in the hospital and proceeded to throw the baby in the wastebasket, where he was discovered by a cleaning lady shortly after. She described the scene as a gory massacre. After the gruesome discovery, the hospital phoned the police, who first spoke with charge nurse H.D. Holliday. That bag opened to see the baby in the bottom, if you would look in the trash. And I looked in there, was when she told me she was something I said, what are you talking about? Because there was a clean liner in the trash bag. So basically he was in the bottom trash on top of him. And then another clean liner put on one person, asked me about the baby, if it was alive, if it was dead, if it was a boy, as a girl, no one asked me. Anything, no, she didn't even have a patient, no, she didn't ask the. Only thing she started doing was crying, and started talking about she didn't know what to do. There was no concern for the baby. No one asked me any questions about the baby, not even the family members. When I went out there and talked to them, did they say, normally people, I would think, would say, was it a boy, a girl? No one asked me one question about the baby at all. I don't even know what to say. I've never seen anything like it. I've seen women that are only married or not married, but I'm pregnant for 6 weeks, and they lose their baby, and they're a mess. That girl went into that bathroom, made no sounds at all, and a baby came out of her. And I don't even know how she functioned that way. The only thing that upsets me the most is I understand she was scared, and I think her mother had a big dynamic on her. And I understand that. I think her mother was probably pretty controlling. I don't know, that I'm just speculation, but she gave me no chance to save that baby. I had no chance. And that's not what I do. My job is to save lives. And I had no chance on that baby. She gave me no chance. And we are a facility that you can drop the baby off, no questions asked. I don't even, you can just leave the baby and go. I don't care, as long as you bring the baby to safely. You're not one of those type of hospitals. So it's hard to fathom what was going on in her mind. Finally, the police, along with hospital staff, proceeded to confront Alexei and her mother about what they had found in the bathroom. We discovered a dead baby in the bathroom. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, Lexi. I told you about this. I just asked you, baby, to tell me the truth. Scared. What did you do to it? Okay, stop right here. Do you guys have on the charge nurse? Or if you guys have any questions for me, like how big is the baby? It's full term. What, 9 months? Lexi, have you watched the news of the girls that what they do to their babies and what they go to jail? Any other questions? Okay. So as of right now, I'm going to say this, we're going to have the detectives come over here and they're going to talk to you. Okay, we have to gather some more information about what's going on. Don't get your statement. They're going to get the doctor's statements. They're going to get everybody's statements. Okay, so I don't know everything yet. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you right now. Right now she's being detained, so she's not going to leave from here at all, period. Okay, so one of us is in your custody. Yeah, she's detained. Yeah, she's not under arrest, but she is detained. Okay, she's not free to leave. So while this whole thing is coming up, is you're not free to leave. Okay, one of us will be in here the whole time with you, because you're not going to try to leave or nothing like that. Now, Lexi's case isn't even an anomalous case. We've covered several cases over the past few years where a mother gave birth to a baby and attempted to hide her pregnancy. 2 cases in particular that stand out are the cases of Skylar Richardson and Kanesha Berry. Both of these mothers claimed their babies were stillborn, and both of their cases had very different outcomes. Skylar was found guilty of abuse of a corpse and received 3 years probation, which were ended early by the court. Kanesha, however, was initially sentenced to death, but May of 2007 her sentence was overturned and she was resentenced to life in prison with a possibility of parole after 40 years. Finally, there was the case of Jakayla Williams, who knowingly threw her newborn into a trash compactor simply because, and these are her words, babies are too expensive. Her case, as well as Alexei Treviso's case, have yet to reach a conclusion. So where does this leave us with regards to Mia McQuillan? We'll have to see. In France, the charge of murder is punishable by up to 30 years in prison. However, France actually has stricter laws for those who seek to hurt children. Murder of a child under the age of 15, which is what Mia is facing, could send her to prison for life. And no matter where you stand on the aisle, when it comes to access to birth control and reproductive health care, that baby boy didn't deserve to come into this world only to be hurled from a second-story window and into the garbage. Case 5. 30-year-old Kira Steger was a confident and driven woman who worked as a manager at Delia, a clothing store. Kira was just very self-motivated. She loved her job. She really took a lot of pride in it. A lot of the people enjoyed coming to work and working with her. She would always somehow find a way to say the perfect thing to help make you feel better. She had a rare talent for recognizing strengths in others, qualities they often overlooked in themselves. Full of ambition and optimism, Kira envisioned a future that seemed bright and full of possibility. But sadly, on Thursday, February 21st, 2013, things took a disturbing turn for the worst. After finishing her shift that day, she told her friend Jasmine about her evening plans. She was looking forward to a romantic date night with her husband, a night they had planned to spend at the mall. Kira had met Jeff, where Kira was working as a bartender at the time. She moved to Minnesota with Jeff. They would spend time watching movies together, going to the mall, maybe having a couple of drinks, talking. She seemed to be happy with where she was at the time, so I was happy for her. To those who knew them, Kira and Jeff appeared to be a happy, strong couple. Like any marriage, they likely had their disagreements, but whatever challenges they faced stayed behind closed doors. At least, that's what their friends, family, and coworkers believed. So when Kira didn't show up for work on Saturday, 2 days after her planned date night, her colleagues became alarmed. This was entirely unlike her. Known for her punctuality and discipline, Kira was never one to be late and always adhered strictly to her schedule. Concerned, Jasmine repeatedly tried calling her, but Kira's phone remained silent. Eventually, she managed to reach Kira's husband, Jeff Trevino. He picked up, but claimed to have no idea where his wife was, saying she had left home early the previous morning and never returned. Jeff didn't appear particularly worried or upset. He explained that Kira occasionally went off the radar for a day or two, sometimes staying with friends or visiting family without prior notice. The only thing that gave him slight concern was the bad weather that day. Snow had been falling heavily all day. He guessed she might have run into trouble on the road, maybe got stuck somewhere with a dead phone battery. But as time passed with no sign of Kira, even Jeff began to feel uneasy. That same day, he filed a missing person report and reached out to Kira's family. After filing the missing person report for Kira Steger, detectives wasted no time launching their investigation. As in most cases, the first step was to question the spouse and those closest to her, and this case was no exception. Detectives went to Jeff's home to speak with him, where they discovered that he and Kira weren't the only ones living there. Another man, Matt Roth, also shared the residence. Jeff told investigators that Kira had left the house around 8:30 a.m. on Friday, heading to work for an event she was required to attend. He insisted that she had been acting completely normal that morning, and he hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. Jeff didn't find anything unusual about Kira occasionally disappearing, even though he had no idea where she was or who she was spending time with. He mentioned that their relationship had been facing some challenges over the past couple of months, but he didn't think it was anything major or worrisome. He saw it as just the usual disagreements that happen in any marriage. Investigators put out an APB for Kira and her missing vehicle. Meanwhile, they decided to visit the Mall of America, the location where she and Jeff had planned their date night, to check if his story held up and to look for any potential leads. The Mall of America is the largest shopping center in the state, so it was naturally equipped with a large number of surveillance cameras. To uncover any useful information, detectives had to comb through hours of footage. Although this was a time-consuming and tedious process, there was no alternative. Working alongside a video expert and forensic specialist, the detectives began reviewing the footage from 6 p.m., the time when Kira had finished her shift. On the video, they spotted a couple entering the frame from the left side near the escalator, with the man holding a yellow bag. It was Kira and Jeff. They were heading toward the mall's exit. The footage showed them leaving the mall and walking toward the parking lot exactly as Jeff had described, and the timing matched perfectly. Unexpectedly, new details caught the detectives' attention. They rewound the footage and carefully re-examined the moment when Kira and Jeff left the mall. This time, they spotted 3 men entering the frame. One of them appeared to recognize Kira, glancing her way and whispering something to his friends. Meanwhile, Kira and Jeff walked on, seemingly unaware that anyone was paying attention to them. The detectives then switched to the parking lot cameras. The couple was seen heading down to the underground parking, and after a short time, a white car was spotted driving away. The authorities kept a close watch on their movements, but nothing unusual or suspicious stood out. Jeff had said that Kira was driving their white Chevy Cobalt when they left the mall. However, the footage didn't reveal who was behind the wheel or show the car's license plate. Based on the time on the video and the camera's position, forensic experts concluded that the car leaving the parking lot was indeed Kira's. Jeff said their evening ended with a cozy family movie night at home, and everything went smoothly without any hint of trouble. Their neighbor Matt Roth was also at home that night. Since Matt lived in the basement of the same building, the detectives wanted to talk to him to see if he had seen or heard anything unusual between Thursday and Friday. Additionally, they were curious to hear what Matt might have to say about the dynamics of Kira and Jeff's relationship. Matt mentioned that he saw Jeff and Kira that evening, but didn't want to disturb them. He went to his basement apartment, lay down on his bed, and slept peacefully through the night. The next morning, he got up as usual, left the house, and didn't notice anything unusual. Matt's account aligned perfectly with Jeff's, so there was no reason to doubt the accuracy of his account. As time passed, the worry for Kira's safety only intensified. With no updates from her and growing frustrated with the lack of progress, her family decided to travel to the Twin Cities. They were determined to do whatever they could to help with the investigation. As Kira's family handed out missing person flyers, investigators remained focused on their work. One of their main priorities was questioning neighbors in the area, a strategy that quickly paid off. A neighbor pointed them to a house across the street, which had a surveillance camera mounted on its facade. The camera could pan left and right, providing a clear view of the street where Kira and Jeff lived. She suggested they speak with the homeowner. Following her lead, detectives approached the man, obtained the surveillance footage, and brought it back to the station for review. Meanwhile, Kira's cell phone records threw up a new lead. Using their law enforcement connections, officers traced the information to a man named Ryan Wendt. At that moment, he was out of state, driving through a snowstorm on his way to Colorado. This was a pretty important person of interest. This is someone that was romantically involved with Kira, that had left the state around the time that she disappeared. It could have been nothing more than a coincidence, but there was also a chance that his sudden departure could seal something far much bigger. The detectives had to get to the bottom of it. They quickly tracked down Ryan and asked him to come in for questioning. He agreed without hesitation. When did you first meet Kira? Sometime in November, I believe, when I was looking for a new store manager. We talked off and on. Did you develop like a personal relationship? Yeah, I would say I did, yeah. Other than the impression that she was going through a pretty significant divorce. The last time I saw her was Sunday prior to her disappearance. According to Wendt, the last time he spoke with Kira was while driving to Colorado. Along the way, they exchanged messages. Do you have your record of text messages with Ryan? Yeah. The messages were sent shortly before Kira went missing, revealing that she had been texting her boyfriend during dinner with her husband. From their exchange, it was clear that Kira was becoming increasingly distant from Jeff. Investigators analyzed Wendt's phone records using cell tower data and reviewed his credit card transactions. The results confirmed that he had been in Colorado that evening, making it impossible for him to be involved in Kira Steger's disappearance. With no evidence linking him to the case, detectives ruled him out as a suspect and released him. The timestamps on the messages showed that Kira had continued texting Ryan even after returning home with Jeff. However, after 11:44 p.m., the messages abruptly stopped. At the same time, another team of detectives, working alongside a video expert, began reviewing footage from a neighbor's security camera. We want to know when did she leave, because that's the next time we'll potentially be seeing her alive. The camera covered a large portion of the street by continuously panning left and right, which made reviewing the footage significantly more challenging. Even if something suspicious appeared, it would only be visible for a brief moment before the camera shifted focus. Because of this, Jeff and Kira's house was only in view for a short time when the camera moved to the right, positioned at the very edge of the frame. Going through this footage was a painstaking process. Forensic experts had to carefully examine each individual frame, as there was no way to predict when something crucial to the investigation might occur. Finally, something unusual caught their attention near the house. After 2 a.m., a car appeared on the footage, its shape merging into a bright blur due to the heavy snowfall. The car moved in an odd way, almost as if it were reversing, trying to get closer to the house. The poor quality of the footage made it hard to fully understand what was happening at that moment. However, at 9:21 a.m., Kira's Chevy can be seen driving away, which matches Jeff's earlier account. Unfortunately, the video doesn't reveal who was driving. Early that morning, luck was finally on the side of the Bloomington Police Department. The Mall of America has huge parking ramps, and a visitor noticed a car that had been sitting in the same spot for an unusually long time. Finding it suspicious, they called for a tow truck. The driver arrived and began inspecting the vehicle. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but just as he was about to hook it up, he saw what appeared to be blood. He immediately contacted the local authorities. Bloomington police got a hold of St. Paul police to coordinate their efforts. When officers arrived at the parking lot, they identified the vehicle. It was Kira's car. It appeared to be blood on the outside of the car. Not a lot of blood, but just some smudges. Behind the car was this grass area that just sort of went downhill. Laying in the grass was this piece of material. It turned out to be a trunk liner, and on the underside, there were traces of a red liquid. DNA testing confirmed it was Kira Steger's blood. With this grim discovery, her case was no longer a missing person investigation. Bloomington police were now dealing with a homicide under mysterious circumstances. For Kira's family and loved ones, this news was devastating. Any remaining hope of finding her alive was shattered. At the same time, an avalanche of unanswered questions overwhelmed them. How did she die? Did she suffer? Who could have held such hatred towards her and take her life? What reason could there possibly be for harming an innocent young woman? The unbearable sense of helplessness tore them apart, and with Kira's body still missing, their grief felt even heavier. The lack of closure making their pain all the more excruciating. Without having the body, it was pretty devastating. We wanted to have a funeral and be able to have her back in some form or another and be able to say goodbye. Meanwhile, investigators continued their meticulous and methodical work. After locating Kira's car in the parking lot, their next priority was determining how and when it got there, and most importantly, who had driven it. With no surveillance cameras inside the parking structure, detectives had to rely on footage from the mall's exterior cameras to find clues. At around 9:45 a.m., a car matching Kira's white Chevy was spotted on video, turning toward the mall's parking lot. Detectives then reviewed the footage from a camera near the parking entrance. Not long after the car entered, a man appeared on screen, walking away from the lot toward the mall. At first glance, it was difficult to make out what was happening. However, upon closer examination, detectives saw the man was heading straight to the taxi cab stand. He briefly spoke with one driver before getting into another taxi and leaving. Detectives immediately set out to identify which company operated the taxis stationed outside the mall. This cab company were equipped with GPS tracking devices. And they tracked it, not Jeff and Kira's block, but the next block over. Investigators returned to the moving camera from Jeff and Kira's neighbor, hoping to spot the taxi. The video review began at 10:40 a.m. Finally, a taxi appeared on the footage, driving past Kira and Jeff's house. It entered the frame from their direction and continued down the street without stopping, at least not anywhere visible on camera. Moments later, an unidentified person came into view. It appeared they had exited the same taxi a few streets away from Kira's home. One striking detail stood out. Their hoodie featured a distinct pattern on it, possibly a logo or emblem, though the footage was too grainy to make out the exact design. Detectives followed the individual's movements as he made his way directly toward Jeff and Kira's house. Then, in a brief but significant moment, the person was caught on camera again, this time standing right at the front door. Now, investigators had two critical questions. Who is this person, and why did he put Kira's vehicle with blood at the Mall of America? Naturally, Jeff became a prime suspect, but proving that he had done something illegal was difficult. The investigators had no choice but to take the next logical step, securing a warrant to search the house for any potential evidence that might still be there. It's unclear why this wasn't done at the beginning of the investigation. From the outside, and even inside, the house seemed completely normal with 3 small bedrooms. Forensic experts carefully examined every inch of the place. Soon enough, their hard work paid off. Right beside the edge of the bed, they discovered a stain, some kind of dried liquid. It strongly resembled blood. Similar stains were also found on the mattress. Forensic specialists sprayed luminol to uncover any hidden or faint traces, and you won't believe what they found. The entire carpet lit up with spots, revealing stains in the bedroom, hallway, kitchen, and even on the stairs. It was also evident that the perpetrator had attempted to clean the carpet, likely using a vacuum cleaner in an effort to erase the evidence. All of these stains were identified as Kira's blood. Along with searching the house, the police also inspected Jeff's SUV. No blood or signs of a struggle were found. However, they did find something interesting. A receipt showing a payment made with a card for gasoline at a local gas station. The transaction occurred exactly an hour and 40 minutes before Kira's car was left at the Mall of America parking lot. Why did Jeff go to the gas station at 8 a.m.? And more importantly, why hadn't he mentioned this to the investigators? The police decided to visit the gas station to do what? That's right, to review the surveillance footage. On their way to the station, the investigators had already developed a theory about what happened that fateful night, though it still needed to be verified. The footage showed Jeff filling up his car, withdrawing cash from an ATM, and then heading back outside. The video quality was excellent, his face was easy to identify, and it was clear what he was wearing. He had on the same sweatshirt with a large pattern on the chest as the person seen on the neighbor's security camera. With this new evidence, Jeff Trevino became the prime suspect in Kira Stegger's murder, and he was soon brought in for questioning. Kira's body had not been found, and no one knew where she was. While investigators strongly suspected she was dead, they needed more concrete proof. I'm going to use my right to remain silent until I can speak to my attorney. In the end, Jeff chose to remain silent during the interrogation, a choice that was both frustrating and disheartening. We don't have as much evidence as we want, but we have enough to charge him and hope that we would be able to find additional evidence. To prove murder, you have to prove that somebody is dead. We didn't have Kira or her body, and it was a huge problem. Using dental records, the body was identified as Kira Steger. Kira had been put in the river without any clothes. There was an injury on Kira's forehead, and then on her right hand, her pointer finger had been snapped, and it was a fresh break. There was no healing, so that happened before she died. It was clear it was a fresh break, with no signs of healing, indicating that it happened before her death. With this new information, the detectives began to piece together a theory of the tragic events that occurred that evening. Kira had spent the evening with her husband, but throughout the night, she was continuously texting her boyfriend. She did so both during dinner at the mall and after returning home. Most likely, her actions didn't go unnoticed by Jeff. From the start of the evening, he began feeling increasingly hurt and angry toward Kira. Initially, he tried to casually ask who she was messaging so much, but when Kira refused to show him her texts, he lost control. In his rage, he grabbed her arm and forcefully took her phone, breaking her finger in the process. But that wasn't enough for him. He then struck Kira on the head with a glass, causing the wound on her forehead. Then, Jeff calmly used a pillow to suffocate Kira, cutting off her air supply. Realizing the crime he had committed, he quickly worked to erase any evidence, putting together a plan to hide the evidence. He moved Kira's car closer to the house, placed her body in the trunk, and drove to a river where he discarded it in the water. The following morning, he withdrew some cash, preparing to take a taxi back home. Afterward, he drove Kira's car to the Mall of America and left it there. He then took a taxi, which brought him almost to his doorstep. Through all of his actions, Jeff tried to make it seem like nothing unusual had happened and that he had no involvement in his wife's disappearance. But as we all know, sooner or later, everyone must face the consequences of their actions. On November 25, 2013, Jeff Trevino was convicted of the second-degree murder of his wife, Kira Steger, and was sentenced to 27.5 years in prison. Kira will always be remembered by those who loved her as a kind and bright person who brought joy and optimism to everyone around her, always willing to support anyone in need. And that's why I will never feel that loved ever again. Case 6. 50-year-old Michelle Summers lies motionless in the bathtub. Unable to comprehend her mother's disturbing state, panic and desperation take hold as Ada screams for her father to help. Martin bursts into the bedroom upon hearing his child's desperate cries, only to find Michelle slumped over in the bathtub and Ada crying uncontrollably. To shield Ada from further distress, he instructs her to seek help from the neighbors. Once Ada leaves, Martin immediately dials emergency services while desperately administering CPR to his wife. Pleasantville Police Department. I need an ambulance right now. Okay, what's the problem, sir? Sir, what's wrong? I've fallen in the bathtub. Who's in the bathtub? Who's in the bathtub? My wife. Okay, is she conscious? She's not. I'm a physician. Okay, sir. Sir, I need you to calm down. Sir, I can't understand you, okay? Can you calm down just a little bit? Okay, your wife is unconscious? She is unconscious. She's underwater. Okay, did you get her out of the water? I did. I couldn't lift her. I let the water out. She's under the water. She's under the water? She's under the water now. Call the emergency ambulance. Okay, is she breathing at all? She's not. Okay, sir, the ambulance has been paged. They're on their way, okay? Do not hang up. What? Sir? The operator is left clueless as the line goes suddenly dead. Frantic to trace the address, the operator reaches out to a colleague for help. Was it 305? Did he get west or south? He didn't. And we tried to get that out of him, and then he didn't connect it, and nothing came up on our caller ID. Okay, I know it's a gayness community we have, so I know. Okay, I wonder. Could it have been 3305 Milk Street? I wonder. It could have been. It sounds like he said 305, because he said 305. I cut the 305 at once. Yeah, it's 3005 Milk Street, okay. 3005 Milk Street? Yeah, do you have a callback number by chance? No, we didn't. Okay, let's call for a screen. No name or nothing? No. Okay. Okay, alright, thanks. Uh-huh. When the operator calls Martin back, she realizes that the situation has spiraled into something far more dire. Oh, why would an adult female be? Hello, sir, this is 911. Can I help you? I need help right now. Sir, they're on their way. Is your wife breathing? She is not. I am a physician. I've got CPR in progress. You're doing CPR. Do you know? Oh no. Sir, how old is your wife? My wife is 50 years old. She just had surgery here a couple days or a week ago. What kind of surgery did she have? She had a facelift. She had a facelift? Yes. Okay, do you know how to do CPR? I am doing it. Okay, do not. Despite the line going dead again, help is on the way. On the other end, Martin's neighbors, Christy and Doug Daniels, rush back with Ada to help him. As the medical staff continues to revive Michelle, Martin reaches out to his older daughter, Alexis, and informs her of the tragic accident. He said, "Your mom, she's in the tub. She's not breathing. I've called an ambulance." And then he hung up. But before Alexis could fly home, Michelle is pronounced dead moments after her transfer to the hospital. The autopsy and police reports provide conclusive evidence that Michelle's passing was a result of a heart attack. But when Alexis arrives, she struggles to accept the cause behind her mother's passing. Her apprehensions stemmed from a haunting request her mother had made during their last meeting, a plea tied to a dark, long-buried secret that had stretched far into the past. But who is Michelle? According to her sister, she is the best kind of sister anyone could ever wish for. She entered different pageants. She won Homecoming Queen. And she did modeling. She was an exchange student over in Switzerland. She excelled at everything. After meeting at a singles event at a California church, Michelle and Martin eloped almost immediately to get married. The marriage grew fulfilling each day as the couple welcomed 4 children. It's now 11:45 in the morning. We're waiting for our doctor, Stephen Williams, to come and induce Michelle. This will be our 3rd baby. Guess who's here, Rachel? Hey, that's your new sister. Rachel, Vanessa, Alexis, and Damien in just 5 years. Martin fast-tracked his medical degree and residency, completing both in just 4 years. By 1987, he was working as a physician in the ER, and was known for his generosity, often advising patients free of charge who couldn't afford it. His career peaked when the Utah governor appointed him as medical director of the Utah Development Center. He also served as an LDS bishop, further cementing his respected status in the community. Martin and Michelle were seen as the ideal family, admired, well-respected, with devoted children. Martin was their role model, while Michelle was their unwavering pillar of support. Driven by their desire for a larger family, the couple adopts 4 more children, Giselle, Ella, and Sabrina from Ukraine, and Ada, who's actually their granddaughter. But behind the facade of success and devotion lay secrets that would unravel everything. Indoors, the couple's marriage was a battleground of frequent clashes when Michelle caught Martin watching explicit content. Each time she confronted Martin about his concerning habits and behavior, he threatened to end his life, forcing Michelle to bury the issues. For years, the couple hid the turmoil from the children and the community. Yet, the truth can only remain hidden for so long. When Martin turned 50, his behavior took a sharp turn. The sudden change was impossible to ignore, and the older children noticed something was off about their father. When my father turned 50, he started acting very strangely. I thought he was just going through a midlife crisis at first. He became just very obsessed with losing weight and his appearance. He'd go into tanning salons. He lost weight. He lost weight. He'd start exercising just all the time, just in the middle of a conversation, jumping and doing push-ups, things like that. Really bizarre. Really strange. Very out of the ordinary. According to ABC News, Michelle grew suspicious of an extramarital affair, but found no proof to provide any basis for her doubts. Michelle had worked as a model in the past, and had always come across as very accepting of her aging. But in March of 2007, something changed. Michelle surprised her family by announcing that she was getting a facelift. Mom said, "I'm going to meet with a plastic surgeon. Your father wants to get me a facelift." She's got a makeup on. Like anyone getting older, you have things that you don't like, and so my dad's trying to do something nice for her. She told me, she said, "You know, your dad's trying to look all better. Maybe I will too." Despite her apprehensions with her mother's drastic decision, Alexis volunteered to return home during her break to assist in her mother's recovery post-surgery. I actually went to the consultations with her to meet this plastic surgeon, and she told him all of her concerns, saying maybe I'll wait until the summer. I would be home from medical school for my summer break, and so I could be there and can help with the recovery. And my dad said, "Oh no, Alexis, you have spring break coming up in a week. Let's do it then." My dad was very pushy. Post-surgery, Michelle developed symptoms that are not consistent with the procedure's side effects. She is constantly drained and drowsy. As a med student, Alexis checks her mother's prescriptions and discovers heavy sedatives on the list that are prescribed by a licensed doctor. Given that the prescription is written by a medical professional, Alexis seems convinced of the medication. But her mother's behavior grows suspicious each day. Despite being blindfolded by bandages, she asks Alexis to hand over the medications so that she can identify them by touch. The strange request unnerves Alexis, pushing her to confront her mother. Michelle shares her suspicions about Martin being involved in something sinister and having an affair, adding to the already shocking revelation. Michelle says something that makes Alexis' blood run cold. She started to cry. She said, "If anything happens to me, make sure it wasn't your dad." And I said, "Mom." I kinda got upset. As Alexis continues to reel in the shock of her mother's suspicions, she also resists her father's demands to leave him alone with her mother while he administers the medicines to her. But as Michelle's health improves substantially, Alexis leaves for university after her spring break, putting behind her mother's suspicions. But here she was now, only a week later, flying back home after listening to her father's panicked cries over the call. As Alexis stomachs the devastating news about her mother's passing, her haunting last request makes her uneasy. As soon as Martin leaves the house, Alexis bolts to her mother's room to count every pill in the prescription bottle. To her dismay, every bottle is empty. When she inquires about the missing pills with her brother, Damien, and his girlfriend, Aileen, she discovers that Aileen has flushed the pills after returning home from the hospital at Martin's request. It made him too sad looking at her having her medication there. As soon as I heard that, things were just starting to add up. Determined to discover the truth, she remembers Michelle had shared Martin's phone account login with her a month ago. Little did she know then that this account is going to expose the beginning of a sinister plan. And we found this number that he'd been calling a lot. The name of the person popped out. Gypsy Jillian Willis. The barrage of text messages and the call durations from the number makes Alexis wonder if Gypsy could be her father's lover, like her mother had suspected. But when she confronts her father, she endures a side of him that she hadn't considered in her worst nightmare. Angered by her accusations, Martin assaults and violates Alexis in the bedroom. Reeling from the truth about her father, Alexis turns to her sister, Rachel, and their aunt, Linda, who had always harbored doubts about her sister, Michelle's sudden death. However, she doesn't share about the assault with her family. Her father's behavior convinces Alexis that her mother was right about Martin's infidelity all along. But proving that he had anything to do with her death would be another matter. Alexis and Linda decide to approach authorities to reinvestigate Michelle's death. Since the autopsy and toxicology reports showed no evidence of foul play, the police dismissed Alexis' claims. Meanwhile, Martin's behavior grows more suspicious as he rushes to organize the funeral and bans all of Michelle's family from attending it. At the funeral, Martin talked mainly about himself and not so much Michelle. Alexis and Rachel were appalled. After the funeral services, Martin introduces Gypsy to the family and announces that she will be the new babysitter for the younger children. Alexis has already confronted her father, but now a cold realization hits her. Gypsy is not going to just be the babysitter, and in that moment, everything changes for the family. While the family was only getting to know about Gypsy now, Martin knew about her intimately. Both had met online, sparking an affair. Even though Gypsy was aware of Martin's marriage, she saw their relationship as a convenient arrangement for both. But now, Gypsy had moved into Martin's house, hinting that this relationship had grown to become more serious. The family soon discovers that Gypsy was hiding disturbing secrets about her personal life. She doesn't care who gets hurt. She doesn't care what circumstances are ruined. The happy couple continues to proceed with their plans. Just 3 months after Gypsy moves in, Martin proposes marriage and plans to send the 4 younger children to California for adoption. Devastated by her father's decision, Alexis meticulously starts documenting his alarming behavior since her mother's death and files a detailed report with the police. In it, she recounts her mother's post-surgery fears, accusing Martin of tampering with her medication, and shares his sinister plans of giving her siblings away for adoption. This time, Alexis claims gain traction when she alleges her father assaulted her during a confrontation about her relationship with Gypsy. The Utah County authorities hand the case over to a specialized investigative team. As investigators finally turn their attention to Michelle's case, they don't know yet that Martin and Gypsy are quietly weaving a scheme that is far more twisted. During the summer break, Martin sends one of his adopted daughters, Giselle, to Ukraine under the guise of reconnecting with her biological family. While he frames it as a short trip to explore her roots, 11 months pass and he makes no effort to bring her back home. When Alexis and Linda grow suspicious of Giselle's prolonged absence, Linda sends her daughter, Jill, to Ukraine. Jill discovers Giselle living in a squalor, still clinging to the hope that Martin will rescue her. When Jill finally brings Giselle back to the United States, authorities stop them at the airport and make a shocking accusation. They inform Jill that a Giselle McNeil with the same security number already exists. Martin had taken his own daughter, Giselle's social security number, and used it to create a new identity for Gypsy. He gave his girlfriend Giselle's name as well. They went to court and legally changed her birth date by 20 years. Gypsy Willis took on the identity of Giselle McNeil and claimed to be Martin McNeil's wife. Investigators also found out the marriage date listed on the form was April 14, 2007, the same day as Michelle McNeil's funeral. This discovery shifts the investigation's focus squarely onto Martin. The situation takes a grim turn when the family reveals a litany of his criminal records. We found that the transcript used for Martin McNeil to get into medical school was totally falsified. Instead of taking his transcript and altering it, he got somebody else's. The transcript was completely fake. His entire career is based on falsified transcripts from different colleges. However, investigators had only scratched the surface when it came to Martin's history. In his 20s, he was convicted of check hiding, a scheme involving fraudulent purchases with unauthorized funds. For this, he served 180 days in prison. Following his release, Martin was placed on felony parole for 3 years. Martin went on to violate this parole by enrolling in medical school and mocking the law yet again. Further investigation also revealed that Martin had a short stint in the Army, where his erratic behavior led to a mental health diagnosis and early discharge. He went on to exploit this diagnosis, collecting government benefits for 30 years, all while pretending to be both a doctor and a lawyer with legitimate credentials. The investigating team is convinced that Martin is a master manipulator. This flood of shocking details leaves Alexis and her siblings stunned, each revelation justifying their mother's suspicions. Martin and Gypsy are handed 4-year prison sentences for forgery and fraud in the case of Giselle's identity theft. Once Martin McNeil was sentenced, Damien, the only boy in the family, did not want anything to have to do with his sisters, and he took his own life in January 2010. He was studying law at NYU at the time. Meanwhile, authorities and Alexis joined hands to find evidence against Martin in Michelle's case. The investigation kicks off with the youngest witness of the case, Ada. I remember the shirt I think was blue, and the pants I think was blue, and I think the jacket was blue too. Oh, okay. Was she all the way in the bathtub, or just part way in the bathtub? All the way. She was all the way in the bathtub. To further explain what she had witnessed, Ada draws a picture showing Michelle lying on her back in the bathtub with her eyes wide open and head above the water as the faucet poured onto her face. Ada insists that the water was red, a detail even the neighbors who had ran to assist Martin on that grim day are able to verify. However, Martin's version of how he found Michelle differs vastly from his daughter. He claims Michelle was bent over, face down in the bathtub, suggesting she slipped while trying to get in. But his version crumbles when investigators found no witnesses to back his account. As Martin's case floods the media, a flood of informants emerges, each sharing more damning information. Former patients came forward, accusing Martin of intimidation and violation. Investigators also discover a disturbing pattern. Martin would abruptly leave hospitals or clinics when his control over patients slipped, only to restart the cycle somewhere else. Alexis confirms this detail by citing frequent school changes tied to her father's job hopping. But the family still had one more shocker to digest. And Walt Hall, Martin's former mistress, steps into the spotlight to share a chilling claim. Martin had once told her, "There's something you can give someone that's natural, that's there after they have a heart attack, so that it's not detectable after they have a heart attack." Armed with this new revelation, investigators request Michelle's toxicology report. While the prescribed medicines appear within recommended limits, the combination raise red flags. The cocktail of these prescriptions was lethal enough to cause dire consequences. When investigators speak with Dr. Thompson, the plastic surgeon who performed Michelle's facelift, he reveals a concerning detail. He has prescribed more medications solely on Martin's insistence. As a fellow physician, Dr. Thompson has presumed that Martin would administer the medicines responsibly. But could she have accidentally mixed up her medication and overdosed? With her eyes bandaged post-surgery, this was a possibility. Furthermore, given that some of the medicines were supposed to alleviate stress, was it possible that she continued to take them after recovery? The investigators seek the opinion of a forensic toxicologist. Michelle had taken 4 different central nervous system depressants: oxycodone, diazepam, promethazine, and zolpidem, commonly known as Ambien. According to the toxicologist, Ambien has a very short half-life, meaning it leaves the body quickly. It's intended for nighttime use, yet many hours had passed since she had supposedly taken it, and it was still present in high concentrations in her system. This didn't add up. She said, "Lexi, I don't know why, but your dad kept giving me medication. He kept giving me things, telling me to swallow. And she said I even started to throw up." Given the heavy medications, Michelle would have been highly impaired, leaving her in a state where she could have been easily manipulated. The medical examiner wasn't aware that when paramedics performed CPR on Michelle, she had expelled several cups of water, and the last bit was pink, frothy foam, which would be indicative of drowning. If Martin had performed CPR, there shouldn't have been any water in Michelle. He's a doctor. He should know how to perform CPR correctly. So the question is, did Martin perform CPR at all? Investigators wondered if Martin may have threatened or coerced the previous doctor into submitting a falsified report, forcing them to label Michelle's death as natural. Armed with all these new findings, the investigating team formally requested Michelle's case of death to be changed to undetermined. Following this, the investigating team swiftly initiates interviews with inmates who were housed with Martin while he served time for Giselle's case. The primary goal is to build compelling evidence to build a solid case against him. One inmate reveals that Martin told him that his marriage had been dying and talked to him about the facelift surgery, and that the cops had nothing to prove. The inmate claimed that Martin also said the calls Martin made upon finding Michelle in the bathtub were scrutinized, and his behavior was also quite telling. His tone was laced with fake anger, while his responses sounded fake and evasive. He repeatedly hung up, raising suspicion that he was intentionally delaying help that could have saved Michelle's life. Amongst the swirl of theories and possibilities, one burning question remained unanswered. Soon, the investigators stumble upon the answer within the letters exchanged between Martin and Gypsy during their respective prison time. They discover that Martin was obsessively and desperately in love with Gypsy. It became evident that the only way he sought to be with her was to eliminate his wife and children from the equation. Martin McNeil was released from jail on July 6, 2012, after serving time for fraud and forgery charges in Giselle's case. However, his freedom was short-lived. With the mounting evidence against him in Michelle's case, investigators secure an arrest warrant against him for Michelle's murder. Just 7 weeks after his release, Martin was back in custody. The trial against Martin McNeil began on October 17, 2013. It marked a first time for the court where prosecutors used a bathtub as a courtroom prop to corroborate witness testimonies, a first in trial history. After 11 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a guilty verdict on September 9, 2014, convincing Martin of Michelle's murder. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. In a separate trial, he was also charged with assaulting Alexis. In the face of where his crooked ways had brought him, Martin McNeil perhaps realized that this was one fraud he couldn't get out of and decided to end his life on April 9, 2017. Alexis successfully completed medical school and achieved her dream of becoming a doctor. In addition, she adopted 3 of her sisters and had 3 children of her own with her husband. She now uses Michelle's maiden name and is known as Dr. Summers. Case 7. In the history of the Joseon dynasty, a prominent figure named Hong Gildong stands out. He was a renowned thief during the reign of the infamous tyrant Yun Sanggun. Later, literary works portray him as a legendary character with exceptional martial arts skills and extraordinary intelligence. Brave and clever, he always aided the weak and fought for justice, becoming a revered folk hero. In modern-day South Korea, a similar figure emerged. This individual successfully escaped from prison multiple times and evaded police pursuit. He stole from the rich to help the poor, supported marginalized communities, and earned the nickname the saintly thief of his era. That person is Shin Chong-won. You're watching True Crime in the World, where we explore the most puzzling cases and most gripping stories. As usual, before we begin unraveling today's mystery, please leave us a like and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you so much. In the history of the Joseon dynasty, a prominent figure named Hong Gildong stands out. He was a renowned thief during the reign of the infamous tyrant Yun Sang-gun. Later, literary works portray him as a legendary character with exceptional martial arts skills and extraordinary intelligence. Brave and clever, he always aided the weak and fought for justice, becoming a revered folk hero. In modern-day South Korea, a similar figure emerged. This individual successfully escaped from prison multiple times and evaded police pursuit. He stole from the rich to help the poor, supported marginalized communities, and earned the nickname the saintly thief of his era. That person is Shin Chong-shin. Chong-won was born on May 28, 1967, into a poor farming family in Gimje, North Jeolla Province, South Korea. He had an older sister and two older brothers. Chong-won's childhood was marked by hardship. His mother passed away from liver cancer when he was still in elementary school. His father later remarried, and they had another son, bringing the family to a total of 7 members. They lived in poverty, with a father who was frequently drunk, short-tempered, and physically abusive, adding layers of trauma to Shin Chong-won's already difficult youth. During his school years, Shin Chong-won struggled academically. Although South Korea had implemented mandatory free education, many schools still collected fees under the guise of donations. Shin Chong-won's impoverished family couldn't afford these costs, leading to constant ridicule and humiliation from his peers and teachers. The pressure from both family and school left him disillusioned, gradually turning him into a rebellious and wayward child. At the age of 15, Shin Chong-won was arrested for the first time for stealing a watermelon. The person who reported him was none other than his own father. After the police notified his school, Shin Chong-won faced disciplinary action and was expelled. At the time, he had only been in middle school for 3 months. Still a minor, his father was given 2 options: take his son home, discipline him, and plead for the school to reinstate him, or send him to a juvenile detention center for others to reform him. Ultimately, Shin Chong-won's father chose to send him to the detention center, despite objections from those around him. During his time in the juvenile detention center, Shin Chong-won neither learned any lessons nor recognized his mistakes. After his release, he became even more audacious, frequently getting arrested for theft and fighting. His life soon became a cycle of crime and imprisonment. Later, he joined his accomplices in a heist, a decision that would irrevocably change the course of his life. In 1989, at the age of 22, Shin Chong-won was no longer satisfied with petty theft near his home. He and 4 friends from his village traveled to the capital, Seoul. There, the group of 5 robbed a stationery store. In the chaos, one of his accomplices attacked the store owner. A few days after the crime, 4 members of the group were arrested, while Shin Chong-won became a wanted fugitive. Even while on the run, he sustained serious injuries. After 6 months of hiding, he was finally captured. During the trial, though he was not deemed the mastermind, the robbery resulted in a fatality, and he was considered an accomplice. Ultimately, he was sentenced to life imprisonment and incarcerated at a prison in Seoul. After serving 5 years, Shin Chong-won was transferred to Busan Prison, a facility in Busan's Gangseo district, specifically for dangerous criminals, to continue his sentence. The prison, with a depth of 160 meters, was heavily fortified with 4.5-meter high concrete walls and a stringent security system, including 24/7 police surveillance. No one had ever successfully escaped from it before. Upon arrival, Shin Chong-won was placed in solitary confinement in cell number 26. The cell was sparsely furnished, with a bed near the door and a toilet inside. The rest of his life was confined within these 4 walls. Sometime later, Shin Chong-won discovered that the guards at the prison frequently used violence to discipline inmates. Under the brutal abuse of the guards, he began to harbor thoughts of escape. His years in prison had taught Shin Chong-won the art of observation. He seized every opportunity to study his surroundings and the guards' routines. Each night, lying on his bed, he mentally cataloged the resources available in the prison, searching for weaknesses. After a period of careful observation, he noticed a ventilation duct above the toilet in his cell. sealed with iron bars. If he could squeeze into the duct and navigate the pipes, it might lead him outside. From that moment, a plan to escape began to take shape in Shin Chong-won's mind. To avoid close monitoring, he made a concerted effort to behave well in prison, earning a reputation as a model inmate. During their sentences, all prisoners were required to perform community labor, with each assigned to different roles. Shin Chong-won was tasked with carpentry work, the first trade he learned in prison. Through his diligence and hard work, he gradually gained the trust of the prison authorities. Taking advantage of a moment when no one was paying attention, Shin Chong-won secretly took a small saw and hid it in the sole of his rubber shoe. In this way, he smuggled it back to his cell undetected. The ventilation duct in his cell was small, only 32 centimeters wide and 28 centimeters high, secured by two vertical iron bars, each 1.5 centimeters in diameter. Using a small saw to cut through the bars was a daunting task, not to mention the noise of sawing metal could easily give him away. But Shin Chong-won had already devised a solution. Every evening from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., the prison broadcasted announcements and allowed the inmates a rare period of leisure time. Shin Chong-won used this window to mask the sound of his sawing. He worked methodically, sawing for just 20 minutes each day, never rushing. After each session, he carefully applied chewing gum to the grooves in the bars to conceal his progress. His caution was so meticulous that months passed without anyone noticing anything unusual. Even so, Shin Chong-won faced other challenges. Standing at 174 centimeters tall and weighing 80 kilograms, the ventilation duct was still too narrow for him to fit through, even without the bars. Undeterred, he persisted in sawing the bars daily while starting a strict diet to lose weight. Within 2 months, his weight dropped from 80 kilograms to 65 kilograms. After 4 months of persistence, his efforts at the ventilation duct paid off. Shin Chong-won had successfully cut through the 2 iron bars and slimmed down enough to fit. When he tested the duct, he was just able to squeeze through. Everything was now in place. All that remained was the right moment to act. However, the prison was under tight surveillance, with guards stationed in watchtowers at all angles. Evading their scrutiny was no easy feat, but perhaps fate was on his side. At that time, Busan Prison was preparing to build a chapel. The construction site became a blind spot for the guards, presenting a golden opportunity for Shin Chong-won's escape plan. After 8 years of imprisonment, the day he had been waiting for finally arrived. On January 20th, 1997, Shin Chong-won, then 29 years old, had meticulously prepared for his escape. As night fell, the prison's lights went out one by one, and the inmates gradually drifted into sleep. In his solitary cell, Shin Chong-won knew the moment had come. He quickly stood up, bent his knees, and covered himself with a blanket to create the illusion that he was asleep on the bed. Then, he moved to the ventilation duct, removed the iron bars he had previously sawed, and took them along as tools. He swiftly squeezed himself into the ventilation duct. In the stillness of the late night, Shin Chong-won was tense. He could hear his own heartbeat and ragged breathing. Crawling through the duct in complete darkness, he tried to make no sound to avoid detection. One wrong move, and all his prior efforts would be in vain. After some time, he successfully reached the outer wall of the building. The vent on the wall was about 3.4 meters above the ground, but Shin Chong-won no longer cared about the height. Gritting his teeth, he jumped down. After scanning the area to ensure no one was around, he dashed to the temporary construction site's outer wall. Using the saw and the 2 iron bars as tools, he frantically dug a hole through to the construction site. In the dead of night, the site was unmanned, allowing Shin Chong-won to carry out the rest of his escape plan unhindered. Having escaped his cell, Shin Chong-won climbed onto scaffolding and used a parachute cord from the construction site to scale the 4.5-meter high prison wall, successfully breaking out. The entire process unfolded with intense drama over the course of 90 minutes. After escaping, Shin Chong-won felt a brief sense of relief and began the next phase of his plan. Despite years in prison, theft remained second nature to him. Within just 500 meters, he stole some clothes, a small amount of money, and a bicycle. He rode the bicycle to central Busan, then made his way from there to the capital, Seoul. Fortunately, throughout the night, no one in the prison noticed his absence, giving Shin Chong-won precious time to flee. It wasn't until the next morning during the prisoner roll call that the guards discovered Shin Chong-won was missing from cell number 26. News of the breakout at Busan prison quickly spread through the media, capturing widespread attention in South Korea. Many citizens grew anxious for their safety and criticized the prison for its lax oversight. In truth, the prison had been negligent, but they never imagined Shin Chong-won would escape in such a manner. Upon arriving in Seoul, Shin Chong-won initially hoped to use the carpentry skills he had learned in prison to find legitimate work. However, wanted posters with his face were plastered everywhere, offering a reward of $5.5 million, equivalent to over $3,600 at current exchange rates. This made it impossible for him to show his face, forcing him to continue surviving through theft. After some time, he decided to leave Seoul and flee to Cheonan in South Chungcheong province. One day, Shin Chong-won stopped by a local cafe in Cheonan that offered companionship services where staff would chat and play games with customers. There, he met Jimin, a cafe employee. That day, Jimin approached him and asked if he'd like to have coffee with her. Looking at the girl in front of him, Shin Chong-won asked if she was feeling okay, surprising Jimin. No customer had ever shown concern for her well-being before. She admitted she had a cold. The two began chatting casually. After asking about her health, Shin Chong-won even went to a pharmacy to buy cold medicine for her. Touched by his kindness, Jimin felt a connection, and their relationship quickly grew close. After a few dates, the two fell in love. However, Jimin had no idea that her boyfriend was a nationally wanted criminal. Eventually, Shin Chong-won confessed his true identity, sharing the painful experiences of his life on the run, constantly moving, with no stable place to call home, drifting from one place to another. Surprisingly, Jimin was deeply empathetic towards Shin Chong-won and unbothered by his criminal status. She invited him to move into her home, and they began living together. Shin Chong-won even built a good rapport with the neighbors, often going fishing and hosting rooftop barbecues. It seemed as though he might have turned over a new leaf, but he continued to roam and make money through theft. 9 months after his escape, on a sunny day, Shin Chong-won visited a car wash he frequented. To conceal his tattoos, despite the hot weather, he wore a long-sleeved shirt and a vest. After the car wash, he was unusually generous, paying for the service and tipping each worker extra. This caught the attention of the car wash owner, who grew suspicious of Shin Chong-won's identity, and called a friend who was a police officer. Upon receiving the tip, the officer saw this as an opportunity to make a name for himself, and quickly headed to the area Shin Chong-won was known to frequent. Following leads, the police found a photo studio Shin Chong-won had visited a few days earlier and obtained a picture of him. From this, they confirmed that the man was indeed the fugitive Shin Chong-won. The police then began investigating Shin Chong-won and his girlfriend's residence, a second-floor apartment in a complex. During their first visit, the apartment was dark and appeared empty. At that moment, Shin Chong-won was out committing a theft in the middle of the night. Despite the late hour, the police waited in the dimly lit hallway. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the staircase, growing closer. The police quickly identified the approaching man as Shin Chong-won and fired a gas gun at him. Caught off guard, he was struck in the head and right eye. The weapon was designed to render a person unconscious, but Shin Chong-won's survival instinct was fierce. Summoning all his strength, he overcame the effects and escaped, disappearing into the vast darkness. From that encounter, a scar remained on his right eye. Following this incident, the police turned their attention to Jimin, but she claimed innocence, insisting she knew nothing of Shin Chong-won's true identity. With no evidence against her, the police could do nothing. Afterward, Shin Chong-won and Jimin risked maintaining secret contact. He decided to leave the city and asked Jimin if she would join him in his nomadic life. This time, Jimin's attitude shifted abruptly. She declared that she wasn't a criminal and shouldn't have to endure such hardship. In the end, despite their lingering feelings, they had no choice but to part ways. Later, Shin Chong-won called Jimin, asking her to pack up his belongings. In the days following their breakup, he had already found a new girlfriend, a 21-year-old younger than Jimin, and moved in with her. At this point, Jimin was still reeling from the heartbreak. She couldn't believe Shin Chong-won had moved on so quickly, as if he had a backup plan all along. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became, though she suppressed her rage and agreed to his request. They arranged to meet at a parking lot in Cheonan. That evening, Jimin arrived early and waited. Soon after, Shin Chong-won appeared, slowly approaching her car. But an unexpected scene unfolded. From the back door of Jimin's car, 2 police officers suddenly emerged, attempting to arrest him. Startled and panicked, Shin Chong-won realized Jimin had betrayed him. Once again, he faced the police. But he was adept at escaping, and not easily caught. After a fierce confrontation, one officer drew his gun to apprehend him, but the bullet jammed, giving Shin Chong-won an opening. He shoved the officers aside, jumped into the driver's seat of Jimin's car, and drove off. Once more, Shin Chong-won slipped away right under the police's noses. In the car Shin Chong-won left behind, police discovered a large amount of cash, luxury watches, and jewelry from his thefts, items stolen from wealthy neighborhoods. They also found a wig, several stolen citizen ID cards, fake license plates, and a diary. The diary chronicled Shin Chong-won's activities after his escape, including multiple minor run-ins with police during his flight, such as driving a car with illegally tinted windows, or smoking in a no-smoking area. Each time he calmly presented an ID, but the police never thoroughly checked if the photo matched him. The diary also revealed that he had once hidden in a sewer system to evade the police. Following this lead, authorities conducted a massive sweep of the sewer systems in Gangnam and Mount Daemo, but to no avail. The reward for Shin Chong-won's capture kept rising, from 5 million won to 10 million won, and eventually to 50 million won, the highest bounty ever offered by South Korean police for a fugitive. A massive force was deployed to apprehend him, even involving the military in the manhunt. During this time, Shin Chong-won committed numerous additional thefts, each time evading capture. This left the police humiliated and reprimanded for their ineffective efforts. Shin Chong-won, a lone fugitive, was single-handedly outsmarting the authorities. Despite their extensive resources, the police couldn't catch him. A police officer who once encountered Shin Chong-won noted his exceptional physical fitness and agility, capable of navigating obstacles with ease during escapes. His skills rivaled those of professionally trained officers, and with each encounter, his experience grew. Additionally, Shin Chong-won had a strong mental resilience, remaining calm under pressure. He could survive in harsh conditions for extended periods, sleeping under bridges, eating rats, yet still managed to elude capture. Not only that, Shin Chong-won was also a charmer. During his time on the run, he formed relationships with numerous women, most of whom were employees at restaurants or cafes, coming from ordinary family backgrounds. Many of them knew Shin Chong-won's true identity as a wanted criminal, but chose not to report him to the police. Some even willingly helped him evade capture. The reason? Shin Chong-won treated them exceptionally well. He was generous, often buying them gifts and taking care of their needs with great attentiveness. Beyond his romantic partners, others whom Shin Chong-won had helped also secretly aided his escape. While on the run, Shin Chong-won committed over 100 thefts, amassing a fortune close to 10 billion won, equivalent to over $7.2 million at current exchange rates. His victims were predominantly wealthy families. After stealing this money, he spent it lavishly to satisfy his material desires and to compensate for the deprivations of his childhood. However, in a surprising twist, Shin Chong-won did something that gradually shifted the perception of some media outlets and the public. He donated a portion of his stolen money to nursing homes, orphanages, churches, and other organizations to support those in need. Despite the risk of capture, he visited these places, spending time playing with children at orphanages. Only in those moments could Shin Chong-won relax, feeling free from the label of a criminal. According to media reports, Shin Chong-won's fame grew with each passing day. His reputation seemed to transform from that of an escaped convict to a chivalrous hero helping the poor. Many people began to support him, with some young individuals idolizing him as a heroic figure, more than just a common thief, a man of honor and justice. One interviewee even shared that their mother admired Shin Chong-won and hoped he would never be caught by the police. Some dubbed this phenomenon the Shin Chong-won syndrome. In South Korea, the relentless spread of this phenomenon turned the police into the losing side in the court of public opinion. This fueled their frustration and embarrassment, intensifying their determination to apprehend Shin Chong-won. In one instance, a police officer, eager to make a quick arrest, resorted to illegally using violence against one of Shin Chong-won's lovers. When the incident came to light, the officer was sacked. Later, a civilian reported spotting Shin Chong-won, prompting a police investigation. It turned out the individual wasn't him at all. Nevertheless, the civilian insisted they deserved the reward, leading to a lawsuit. Ultimately, the civilian won the case and received 50 million won, approximately $36,232 at current rates. Throughout the investigation, numerous controversies arose. Some police officers spread rumors to heighten Shin Chong-won's perceived danger, including claims that he carried a gun. This instilled fear in many rank-and-file officers, particularly those with limited firearms training, when confronting him. There were even rumors that some officers recognized Shin Chong-won, but were too afraid to arrest him. Finally, on July 16, 1999, an event brought his run to an end. That day, a plumber called the police after spotting Shin Chong-won in an apartment. The plumber, a former military intelligence officer with a keen eye for observation, had been hired to fix a pipe. While working, he sensed something was off. In the apartment, clearly occupied by a couple, there were no shared photos on display. The male resident kept his cap on indoors, pulled low over his face, and avoided much interaction with the plumber. The plumber grew suspicious, believing the man resembled the notorious fugitive Shin Chong-won, often featured on television. To confirm his suspicions, the plumber returned to the apartment under the pretense of having forgotten a tool, taking a closer look. He then checked the tenant information at a real estate agency and discovered the apartment was registered under a woman's name. In South Korea at the time, a traditionally male-dominated society, it was common for apartments to be registered under a man's name. This led the plumber to suspect the man might indeed be the wanted fugitive Shin Chong-won. After receiving the tip, the police immediately took action, vowing to apprehend Shin Chong-won and bring him to justice. A team was dispatched to the provided address. When they knocked on the apartment door and asked if the man inside was Shin Chong-won, he didn't resist and admitted his identity. The operation was a success, capturing Shin Chong-won after 907 days on the run. When asked about his feelings, Shin Chong-won simply smiled and said he felt very relieved. On the day of his arrest, he was wearing a vibrant floral shirt from the brand Missoni, which immediately drew attention and became a fashion item at the time. Shin Chong-won had always been cautious, but this time, his capture stemmed from an unexpected lapse. Recently, he had been preparing for marriage, but got into a financial dispute with his girlfriend, which left him in a foul mood and momentarily distracted. This lapse allowed the plumber to spot him. The plumber who identified Shin Chong-won was later granted honorary police status. For a time, Shin Chong-won was dubbed a modern-day Hong Gil-dong, or South Korea's Robin Hood. Many believed his acts of stealing from the rich to help the poor embodied justice. Some citizens even wrote signed petitions pleading for leniency, hoping the court would grant him a lighter sentence, a phenomenon unprecedented in South Korean society. However, the court saw it differently. Shin Chong-won had committed crimes and had to face the law's consequences. Despite his charitable acts, they did not warrant clemency. The court upheld his original life sentence and added an additional 22 years and 6 months in prison. Many South Koreans felt the sentence was excessively harsh and unfair, viewing it as a means of venting frustration and exacting revenge rather than upholding justice. They argued the punishment lacked compassion and was merely a response to the embarrassment Shin Chong-won had caused the police. Conversely, others believed he deserved the sentence, arguing that his actions broke the law and had negative societal impacts. In a report, Shin Chong-won exposed various misconducts by South Korean police, including bribery and allegations that an officer had assaulted one of his girlfriends. According to media reports, around 50 officers were disciplined for inefficiency, while approximately 20 others faced trials for suspected corruption and misconduct. At this point, it's impossible to overlook Shin Chong-won's efforts to better himself. Having only completed elementary school, he pursued education during his first imprisonment, passing exams to earn a high school diploma. After his second arrest and imprisonment, he became a model prisoner, demonstrating positive changes in his behavior and mindset. 5 years later, in 2004, Shin Chong-won completed high school and went on to study law and psychology. He hoped that by studying law, he could protect his legal rights, and through psychology, he could help others struggling with mental health issues. In 2009, a decade after his second imprisonment, Shin Chong-won sued the prison. Because the facility prohibited him from sending letters, he researched relevant laws and took the prison to court, demanding $3 million and approximately $2,174 at current rates in compensation. A year later, a journalist requested to interview him, but due to his special status, the request was denied. Shin Chong-won filed another lawsuit, ultimately winning $1 million and about $725 in compensation. While in prison, Shin Chong-won wrote an autobiography. Upon its release, the book once again captured public attention. It offered a glimpse into his complex inner world. His writing style was compelling, with heartfelt prose. In one passage, he wrote, "To capture me, they even deployed the military and spent a fortune. Someone like me might not have ended up this way. In elementary school, if a teacher had gently patted my head and told me I was a good kid, I might not have reached this point. In 5th grade, my teacher shouted at me, 'This kid didn't bring money to school. Get out.' That was when the seed of evil was planted in my mind." At the end of his autobiography, Shin Chong-won called for more compassion toward troubled youth, so they wouldn't follow the same path and become criminals like him. His story truly captured widespread attention, prompting reflection on the deeper issues behind a troubled young man's journey. In August 2011, 12 years after his second imprisonment, Shin Chong-won attempted to take his own life. He was saved at the brink of death but suffered brain damage. Many speculated that the reason for his attempt was the death of his father in July of that year. Though his father was not a good man, he was still his father. On a May evening in 2023, around 8 p.m., Shin Chong-won, then 56, made a second attempt to end his life. During a routine check, prison staff found him unconscious after hanging himself in his cell. He was rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment. 2 days later, South Korea's Ministry of Health reported that Shin Chong-won's condition had stabilized and he no longer needed a ventilator. Shin Chong-won's life story has been adapted into comics and films, yet public opinion about him remains divisive. Some sympathize with his tragic childhood, viewing him as a modern-day's saintly thief. Others completely reject this perspective, particularly a police spokesperson who publicly stated that most South Korean media do not see Shin Chong-won as a noble thief, but as a true criminal. Shin Chong-won committed numerous thefts and other crimes while on the run, sparking debates and drawing significant attention. His life has touched the hearts of many ordinary people, from his difficult childhood to the grueling experiences of his prison escapes. This has prompted reflection and discussion on issues like family dynamics for troubled youth, education, prison management, police efficiency, and most critically, why a criminal garnered so many pleas for leniency. In his autobiography, Shin Chong-won expressed deep remorse, emphasizing that the law is a moral boundary, and anyone who crosses it must pay a price. Today he remains in prison, unable to see the blue sky outside, confined to facing the cold walls of his cell each day. Yet, Shin Chong-won has something most ordinary people do not, a legendary life.